Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today. This hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the City Council Committee on Children and Youth. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony on Bill number 180368 and Resolution number 171142. I recognize a presence of the quorum of committee members. I'd like to acknowledge the members of the committee in attendance. Council members Parker and Johnson, thank you very much for being here. A quick procedural note. We are going to hear testimony on Bill number 180368 first, and then proceed into a public meeting to consider action on that bill before hearing testimony on Resolution number 171142. I thank everyone here for their attendance and their patience. Council members, do you have any opening remarks? The clerk will now read the title of the bill.
Resolution 180368, amending Chapter 9, 3500 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Fair Criminal Record Screening Standards, by adding a section providing for prohibition on consideration of or inquiry about an applicant's juvenile records at any stage of the employment or licensing process, and adding definitions, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you very much. This bill provides further protections to those with juvenile records who seek to gain work experience and build their skills. Juvenile records currently are too easily accessible, and while Pennsylvania law strictly limits their consideration during the hiring process, such protections are not currently reflected in our local ban-the-box law. This provision will cement Philadelphia's ban-the-box law as a national model. I want to thank the Juvenile Law Center, Community Legal Services, the Philadelphia Human Relations Commission, and the staff and administration of the Philadelphia Juvenile Justice Services Center, including Lindback Award winner Principal Deanna Ramsey, for their tremendous contributions to making the juvenile justice system work for our young people. Will the clerk please call the first witness to testify on the bill?
Rue Landau, Ria Shah, Jamie Golan, and Sasha, client of Community Legal Services.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to make a slight procedural adjustment for the purposes of attendance of quorum right now with our council members. Right now, we're just going to suspend the public hearing for a moment, and we're going to go into a public meeting to consider the action to be taken on this bill. The chair recognizes Councilman Kenyatta Johnson for a motion on bill number 180368.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that bill number 180368 be reported out of this committee with a favorable recommendation that the rules of council be suspended to allow for first reading in our next session of council.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Second. Thank you very much. It has been moved and properly seconded that bill number 180368 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 180368 will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, with a request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. So now we are going to go back into our public hearing to consider Bill number 180368. And I'd like to just recognize the witnesses here today. Thank you so much. If you could just start by stating your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony. Oh, yeah. Before you start, I'm sorry, the chair recognizes Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One, I want to say thank you to both you and our colleague, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, for your leadership on this issue, and just want the record to reflect that while I'm here, and I wanted to make sure that we voted so that we could have enough votes present today in order to vote the bill out of committee. However, I do have to leave due to a long-standing commitment in the 9th Councilmatic District, but wanted to make sure that my vote was counted on this issue. So thank you, and to all of the advocates, and particularly the young people in this audience. Your presence here today will help put us on the path to bring some much needed balance to the scales of justice relative to juvenile justice in the city of Philadelphia. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And the chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, just in starting, I want to thank my colleague, Councilwoman Gim, for being on the front line of advocating for our youth. I come from a background where I have a special interest in making sure we reduce the school to prison pipeline, and most importantly, making sure that juveniles do not become adult prisoners. I remember as a young man growing up in South Philadelphia, and I always wasn't on the right path, and had a judge by the name of Judge Reynolds. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, and I remember he sentenced me to juvenile probation because during that time I was at least going to school. And so now as an adult, being a graduate of Mansfield University, where I received my degree in criminal justice with dual minors in philosophy and sociology, as well as being a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Fell Center of Government, where I received my master's degree, as well as receiving a certificate from the Harvard School of Business for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Management. It's legislation such as this that has allowed me to go on and become the young man who I am today. And because I got in trouble as a juvenile, it didn't hinder me from being able to be a council person representing the 2nd Councilmatic District, as well as a former state representative. And so I do want to thank all of you for stepping up to the plate and providing your testimony in support of this legislation. But most importantly, Councilman Helen Gim, who brought to my attention that how seriously and important it is to make sure that our young people have all the opportunities that are available to them to go on and follow their own dreams, goals, and aspirations in spite of the decisions they may have made in their lives. And so I want to thank the councilwoman, and now I'm going to turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Johnson, and it is really an honor to be able to partner with members of City Council who've long held this issue of young people in our systems at the most vulnerable stages of their lives in the highest levels of city government, so thank you very much. So if you could just please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Gim and members of the Committee on Children and Youth for giving me the opportunity to testify in support of Bill number 180368. I'm Rue Landau, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, and I'm joined by my Deputy Director, Pam Gwaltney, who oversees our compliance unit, who handles the ban-the-box cases. The Commission is a city agency that administers and enforces the Fair Practices Ordinance, the law that prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations, and the delivery of city services. Our agency also enforces the Fair Criminal Records Screening Standards Act, formerly called the Ban-the-Box Law, and now known across the nation as the Fair Chance Hiring Law, found in Chapter 9-3500 of the Philadelphia Code. Over the years, Philadelphia has amended the Fair Practices Ordinance and other laws numerous times as the city has taken the lead on civil rights initiatives that reflect the reality of our times. What brings me here today is that once again, the city has the opportunity and responsibility to further strengthen its protection of the civil rights of individuals with criminal records, to include those individuals encountering the criminal justice system as juveniles. I'm going to skip over some of my testimony. I know we're short on time, and I've got a lot of lawyers on the panel here. So, in 2011, to combat the multiple employment obstacles for people with criminal records, Philadelphia passed the Ban the Box law. The purpose of the law was to eliminate barriers to employment for people with criminal records by prohibiting questions about criminal history on job applications and during the first interview, so that people with records could be reestablished with their communities and become contributing members of society. It also prohibited questions regarding records of arrests that did not lead to conviction. After a few years, it became clear that our fair chance hiring law needed to do more than remove the box from the application to be truly effective. In 2015, the law was amended to prohibit an employer from running a criminal background check until after the applicant received a conditional offer of employment. If, through a background check, an employer discovers that an applicant has a criminal history, the applicant must be provided an individualized assessment for the particular job. In other words, they look at the nature of the crime, when it occurred, and what is the connection to the job the person is seeking. These standards are consistent with existing state law and federal EEOC guidance. After the assessment, the employer may reject an applicant based on their criminal record only if the employer can reasonably conclude that the applicant would present an unacceptable risk to the operation of the business or to coworkers or customers. A rejection must be presented to the applicant in writing, with an opportunity for the applicant to respond to the determination. This current system removes significant barriers to employment and provides true assistance to people with records as they reintegrate into their communities. It also provides greater clarity and guidance to employers. Since our law was passed in 2011, the Commission has helped to ensure effective implementation of the ordinance through education as well as enforcement. Through outreach efforts, partnerships, and trainings, we have reached hundreds of employers and thousands of people with criminal records. Also, we have investigated and successfully resolved over 160 complaints regarding noncompliance with the law. This summer, we will expand our outreach efforts through a media campaign that will allow us to reach even more people with records. The city now has the opportunity to do more to overcome the barriers to employment by closing a loophole and ensuring that juvenile criminal records do not create barriers to employment. Across the nation, juvenile records are protected according to state-by-state policies regarding confidentiality and expungement. Nevertheless, increased access to juvenile records through online databases and background check companies only increases the likelihood of lifelong consequences of juvenile adjudications. By establishing limitations on the consideration of juvenile records for employment, Philadelphia will remain a leader in fair chance legislation. Passage of this bill will help ensure that youth who have interacted with the criminal justice system are more likely to have a fair chance at employment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Would the next witness please state your name and your testimony, and feel free to summarize as you see necessary. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Ria Saha Shah. I'm an attorney with Juvenile Law Center, the first public interest law firm for children in this country. Juvenile Law Center advocates for the rights, dignity, equity, and opportunity for youth in the child welfare and justice systems. Core to our work for over 40 years is ensuring opportunities for justice system-involved youth. I'd like to start by first recognizing the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations and Councilwoman Gim for her leadership in introducing this important piece of legislation that furthers opportunities for youth involved in the justice system. As we just heard, this ordinance that we're amending, that has a proposed amendment today, is one of the most robust laws of its kind in this country, and today this council has the opportunity to make it even stronger. To date, few ban-the-box provisions have explicitly addressed the records of young people involved in the juvenile justice system. This would be one of the first of its kind in the country. At the first moment of contact with law enforcement or the court system, a young person has a record. These records can impede successful transitions to adulthood for many youth, especially when they remain available long after the youth's involvement with the justice system has ended. Records can create obstacles for youth seeking employment, education, housing, and other opportunities. The common belief that juvenile records are confidential or disappear after the age of 18 is false. With an increase in juvenile crime in the 1990s, Pennsylvania, along with a number of other states, eliminated earlier practices designed to protect juvenile record confidentiality. As juvenile crime has been on steady decline over the last 15 years, states have begun to rethink these policies to give youth a meaningful chance at rehabilitation and positive reintegration into the community. Yet today, records are still used as an excuse to deny opportunities and to protect employers and landlords from liability. Research confirms, and the law recognizes, that youth have the capacity for change and rehabilitation, and yet records continue to erect barriers to youth success as they grow into adulthood. Moreover, records can reinforce the pervasive racism in our justice system. Black youth are 5 times more likely to be arrested and incarcerated than white youth. Juvenile records limit their future opportunities, perpetuate mass incarceration of people of color, and sustain cycles of poverty. This new legislation will help to reduce those consequences. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this issue today.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Would the next witness please state your name and read your testimony into the record? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Golan, and I'm a supervising attorney in the employment unit at Community Legal Services, where I also co-lead CLS's Youth Justice Project. CLS's employment unit has been at the forefront of advocating for the rights of people with records for decades. Every year, we work with around 1,000 low-income Philadelphians who are seeking employment but are struggling because of juvenile or criminal records. Whenever possible, we help our clients to clear up their records through the expungement process, but we also advocate for our clients to be able to work so that they can support themselves and their families. Philadelphia's Fair Criminal Record Screening Ordinance, or Ban the Box as it's more informally known, has become a very important tool for us in our office that we use every single day to ensure that our clients are not being unfairly denied employment opportunities. Expanding the law to explicitly bar consideration of juvenile records in the hiring process will address the growing problem we see in our office of people being denied employment because of juvenile records, sometimes even more than a decade after their system involvement has ended. Especially in high-growth industries like the healthcare industry, where background checks are very routinely conducted, juvenile records are particularly likely to pop up, causing unnecessary denials of employment. While state law already makes clear that juvenile adjudications should not be considered the same way as adult criminal convictions, without explicit statutory language barring juvenile records from consideration in the hiring process, juvenile records all too often lead to job denials. The impact of such job denials are deeply felt by individuals and communities. 1 in 4 Philadelphia youth are considered opportunity youth, youth who are disconnected from education and employment, and this is a rate far higher than the national average. It is also estimated that 1 out of 3 youth, by the time they reach age 25, will have been arrested. With nearly 90% of employers conducting some kind of criminal background check in their hiring process, it is absolutely essential for employers to understand that juvenile records should never be used to deny employment. The future of our city rests on the ability of young adults to be able to find jobs, build careers, and support their families. Expanding our Ban the Box law to make clear that employers cannot consider juvenile records in the hiring process is a critical step forward to ensure opportunity for our city's young people. I want to thank Councilwoman Gim and the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations for your commitment to this important issue and for having us here to speak today. And I'm particularly excited to have CLS client Sasha here with us today to talk a little bit more about what her experience has been like in being denied employment because of a juvenile record.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to City Council.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Sasha, and I am a mother of a 3-year-old daughter, a daughter to an aging mother and a Philadelphia native. When I was 15 years old, I was living with my mom, who split up with my dad, and I ended up selling, pardon me, and money was very tight. We didn't have enough to meet our daily needs. I ended up selling drugs to try to get some more money for our family. I was arrested and found guilty of a felony drug dealing. After that happened, I never got in trouble again and haven't been arrested in more than 15 years. After graduating from high school, I was able to find work, mostly in the retail field. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I left my job due to complications within my pregnancy. and focused for a while on being a good mother to her. Unfortunately, then my mother became very sick, and I began spending most of my time taking care of her. I was helping her with bathing, cooking, cleaning, paying bills, food shopping, making sure she took her medication, making doctor's appointments, and taking her to doctor's appointments. Since I already helping taking care of my mother pretty much full time, and we needed more income for our families, I decided to apply to be a home health care worker so I could get paid to take care of my mother. When I began applying to home health agencies, I discovered that my juvenile record was still coming up on my background all these years. Later, I thought because it was a juvenile case, it would have been automatically expunged or kept private. And I was very surprised that it kept coming up. Unfortunately, the home health agencies I applied did not understand and that juvenile records are different from adult records, and they denied me from being able to work with my mother. I came to Community Legal Services for help getting my juvenile record expunged, but that proceeded took more than 6 months. In the meantime, my mother could not wait and had to get a different home health worker. Finally, my record was expunged. I was able to find part-time work in the home health care, but I went for many months with no income and was denied the opportunity to take care of my sick mother, all because employers did not understand that my juvenile record should not and have not been held against me. I am here today to support this bill, that other people will not have to go through what I went through, and so that it is very clear to employers in Philadelphia that juvenile records should not keep people from working to provide for their families. As a kid, we all make mistakes, but it's important that people are able to move past these mistakes and have opportunities in life. Thank you, Council.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your testimony. It's so deeply moving and emphasizes the importance of why we're moving forward on this. Thank you so much for your testimony today. Is there anyone else who would, the chair recognizes Councilman Johnson for a question.
Thank you. This question is for Jamie from Community Legal Services. So how many cases do you receive on a yearly basis that you have to help juveniles with and their family members with as it relates to this particular issue?
I would say of the 1,000 clients I mentioned we help every year with juvenile or criminal records, at least a quarter of those clients are young people who are facing barriers to employment because of juvenile records.
And what's your clearance rate in terms of assisting them with the expungements?
With the expungement process, we're able to be very successful, but the issue is that it can take a very long time for the records to be removed from all the places where they live, because the records need to come out of the court system, out of the state police system, out of the FBI system, out of commercial background check company systems. And for all of that to actually be implemented can take up to even a year from the time somebody comes into our office. So while expungement is a great remedy and should be expanded, it's not enough to just rely on expungements, and not everybody qualifies for expungements and not right away. So for those who won't benefit from expungement or while the expungement process is ongoing, these additional employment protections are really critical.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And last, Sasha, just thank you for stepping up to the plate and sharing your testimony publicly during this hearing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
The chair recognizes the presence of our vice chair, Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony and speaking to this. Is there anyone else who would like to testify to this resolution? Mr. King, do you want to come forward? Sure. Ma'am, do you want to come forward up here too? Thank you very much. If you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Thank you, Mr. King.
Yes, my name is Saeed King, and I am a teacher at the Philadelphia Juvenile Justice Service Center. And Councilwoman Gim, I just thank you very much for leading the charge on getting this law passed. Yes, again, I am from the Juvenile Justice Service Center, and we see approximately 1,500 kids, and that's not including the summer in the course of a year. We have 3 times more boys than girls, and the average student at our center is there roughly about 35 days. And while they're there for 35 days, their time served, whatever time they're going to be sentenced, doesn't start until they actually leave. So if you have a kid that is there for 35 days or even longer, and they're sent away for 4 months, they're sent away with 4 months, so they actually did, let's say if it was 3 months, so they actually did in total 7 months, where they had maybe had a 4-month charge. At our program, the students, they actually receive credit towards graduation. They actually attend school. And our program consists of a phenomenal CTEC vocational program that we just started in the past couple years, where students are able to learn about fiber optics, copper wiring. We have an audio visual program. They learn about energy management. Our goal is to prepare them for the workforce. So when they leave, they're able to have a second chance. When I think of these students that come there, some of them come from impoverished backgrounds. Just because they come from a impoverished background does not mean that they are stupid. So as a teacher there, I just not only teach my subject matter, but I actually teach life as well. That's the goal, to reduce recidivism and keep them from returning. So I opened up a lesson this past week about, and wanted just to get their voices, and I told them what I was going to be doing here today, and I'm just run off a couple bullets of what the kids are saying. When it comes to ban the box, they said ban the box for juveniles should be enforced because it gives them, it makes way for their future. It also, they said that the expungement process, it takes too long. They said charges based on an adult mindset instead of a child mindset. They make mistakes as children, and we know that in the development of the brain, is not the same versus the brain of an adult. They also said they being judged based on their environment, the environment that they're coming from, because some of them have fell victim to be product of their environment, they're being judged on that. They also said that there is a lack of opportunities for teenagers. And because there's a lack of opportunity for teenagers, they tend to fall victim of the circumstances around them. They also said that the box, it stands in their way, and it actually hindered the vision of their future. And one of the students was very illustrative in trying to explain it. And she said pretty much, the box is there. They know that they have committed a crime, so what's the use? All the work they have put in at the center and have gained certifications in the CTEC program, what's the use if you're going to judge me before I even get an interview? So the rejection of this law, if this law is rejected, this bill is rejected, which I pray that it's not, it will be a slap in the face to all the hard work that these students have put in trying to make a difference in their lives. So if I can close out, I will end on a quote from a mentor of mine. Each of us need all of us, and all of us need each of us. So with the passing of this bill, it will validate the voice of the youth. and it would give them hope that they really mean something.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Mr. King, I especially just want to acknowledge you and your principal, Deanna Ramsey, and of course, the presence of Tameen Farlow for inspiring us to pursue this legislation in the
Yes.
first place. I think that was extremely moving and a really powerful conversation. And we just really want to thank you for your dedicated work and leadership on behalf of our young people in the city. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to testify on behalf of this bill? Seeing none, this concludes the public hearing on Bill number 180368, and we will now go into a public hearing to consider resolution number 171142. The clerk will now read the title of the resolution.
Resolution 171142, authorizing the Committee on Children and Youth to hold public hearings reviewing the quality of services, and namely the quality of education, that residential placements contracted with the City of Philadelphia provide for the care, treatment, and development of Philadelphia youth.
Thank you very much. Before I ask my council members for opening remarks, I just want to thank a few people in the audience who are here today. State Representative Vanessa Lowry Brown, thank you so much for being here. I want to recognize our former councilman, Denny O'Brien. Thank you very much, Councilman, for being here as well. I know we have a number of other people, including Commissioner Joan Ernie from CBH. I want to acknowledge the presence of District Attorney General Josh Shapiro's office, as well as our Disability Rights Network, our school district, and our district attorney's offices. Thank you very much, everybody, for moving forward. Would any of my council members like to make any opening remarks before we head into this resolution? No? Okay. So, we are here today with this, incredible audience of advocates and people passionate about the future of our young people to talk about youth placement, youth confinement, and youth imprisonment. We're here to talk about the ways that our children end up in these placements, what happens to young people once they have contact with this system. And today we're here to hold space for an issue that has the remarkable ability to be, at the same time, both oversimplified and overcomplicated. Our youth who are put in placement sit at the intersection of our education, justice, and child welfare systems, and we need to do right by them. And almost 100% of the time, our young people in institutional placements got there because we didn't hold up our end of the bargain. We recognize that this is not a new issue, that in the 1970s, the head of the Pennsylvania juvenile system called the model of institutional placements antiquated and a model that needed to go. I've talked with my council colleagues, including Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown, who've talked about their years of working on this issue and having to bring it back up again. In July, the National Council of Family and Juvenile Court Judges passed a resolution calling for independent oversight of youth confinement facilities. These judges noted that nationally, 54,000 youth are housed in residential confinement facilities every year. And since 2000, youth in 29 states and the District of Columbia have experienced, according to the report, systemic and recurring maltreatment while confined in a juvenile detention facility. This report showed that over 40% of youth in secured facilities reported feeling somewhat or very afraid of being physically attacked while detained. 45% reported that staff unnecessarily used force against youth. And 30% reported that solitary confinement was used as a form of discipline. There were nearly 9,500 allegations of sexual victimization of youth reported in state or local and private facilities between 2007 and 2012. And just today, the Inquirer reported on Philadelphia's over-reliance on solitary confinement. Our city has made significant progress. Fewer kids are in placement than once was. But that decline is not good enough. Because that decline was not good enough for David Hess, who was murdered at Wordsworth over an iPod. That decline was not good enough for the dozens of teenage girls sexually assaulted by staff members at Wordsworth. And it wasn't good enough for Omega Leach, who was strangled and killed in 2007 at the Chad Youth Enhancement Center in Tennessee, thousands of miles away from home. Omega's death brought most of our kids back into our state, and David Hess's death and the sexual assault of teen girls did shut down Wordsworth. But I know I speak on behalf of my colleagues when I say that there won't be another on our watch. There won't be one more death, one more assault, or rape in facilities that we fund with taxpayer dollars if we have anything to do with it. And in the last few months, we've had a chance to learn from so many of Philadelphia's best advocates. We've learned from jurisdictions across this country that an 8-hour drive away from home is simply too far. Millions of dollars in taxpayer money is too much to spend on a subpar education. Our systems, no matter how difficult, how many, and how complex, has an obligation to get it right. And as elected officials, we have a role to play in that process. Today, our city agencies, DHS, CBH, the Philadelphia School District, and others will share the critical work that they are doing to better support our young people and uphold their commitment for the coming months. I'd like to especially thank our DHS Commissioner, Cynthia Figueroa, for her leadership and partnership on this issue and for her dedication to reducing the number of child welfare system-involved youth in placement. It's clear that you stand with our young people and their families. And I want to thank our legal and advocacy community who pushed my office and me to look at this issue and do more. Your attention to detail, your commitment to supporting our young people who are all too often forgotten is inspiring. You are the unsung heroes of our city. I'd like to And I want to thank the foundations that are here today who are investing in this work to help us do better. Stonely, United Way, the Philadelphia Foundation, and others. I would be remiss if I didn't personally thank Michelle Payne of PCCY for organizing the groups today to stand alongside, united with our young people. And finally, I want to talk about our youth, our young people. We hold this space for you, you who have come here to speak today about your experiences in placement. This hearing happened because of your courage and because of your pain, and your brave stories bring us here today, and I want to say clearly and for the record that we should have done more to protect you. And we are gathered here to make good on that promise of going forward. And I want every person, young person who is here, or who has spent time or is spending time in placement to know that we see you, we hear you, and we believe you. And as chair of the Committee on Children and Youth, and on behalf of my committee members, I know that this body is committed to addressing the deep inequalities embedded in our system. We're committed to learning what works, what doesn't work, and how we're going to stand with our young people moving forward. So will the clerk please call the first witnesses for the panel to testify on this resolution?
Lily Jimenez, Had May, and Quilla David.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
So with the chair recognizes Councilmember Reynolds Brown for some opening remarks as well.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Chairwoman. Good afternoon, everyone. Councilwoman Gim has spoken quite eloquently for our purpose, and that is to be stronger, better advocates and professionals when it comes to lifting up and protecting our children. So our young people, you give us the purpose and need for this particular hearing. Historical context is important. The record should reflect that it was Mayor Street, during the Mayor Street administration, when government began to look more seriously, more deeply, and more strategically at why we were sending so many young people across the Commonwealth boundaries. And the sad news is that 15 years later, we're compelled to revisit this issue to see, A, learn what the better practices are, what is working, and then to look to see what coordinated efforts how coordinated efforts have improved between DHS, the school district, and CBH. Working in silos will not get us where we need to be. Working in silos will not get us where we need to be if we are authentic and serious about making life changes for these young people. So the expectation and my hope is that I will hear in testimony what the progress has been between DHS, CBH, School District of Philadelphia, along with the work that Ms. Keir does every single day. Silos are not going to get us there. So if there has not been an improvement, then it requires us on this side of the table to mandate and dictate that those agencies work more coherently together. That's the only way we're going to make a huge difference in this pervasive still practice of sending young people out of the Commonwealth. We look forward to your testimony.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. Welcome again. And if you would like to state your name first and then proceed with your testimony.
Okay. My name is Lily Jimenez. And good afternoon. My name is Lily, and I am 16 years old.
Pull your mic a little closer.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Lily, and I am 16 years old. I am a current youth advocate with Juvenile for Justice with the Juvenile Law Center. I am a sophomore in high school. I love to shop, dance, be with my family, and have fun. I have many plans for the college, for my future, including attending College for Criminal Justice, joining a SWAT team, becoming a lawyer, and advocate for youth, foster youth. This year, I started working as a youth advocate at Juvenile Law Center. I am part of the Achievement Independent Center, and I am getting support from my case manager and parents to stay active and seek out new hobbies. When I entered the delinquency system, I was only 13 years old. I am speaking here today to send a message to the parents and leaders of Philadelphia. My mother thought going to a juvenile holding facility would be good for me. She thought I would be safe. She didn't realize that I would be abused, strip searched, mistreated, or I wouldn't be able to continue my education. I hope that by me sharing my story today, parents and leaders will realize that youth are better off staying in their own homes. I am sharing some really hard things that happened to me because I don't want them to happen to other youth. I first went into placement in May of 2016 and was in 2 different facilities for a total about 7 months. First, I was at a lockdown placement in Philadelphia, and it was the worst. There was a lot of physical abuse happening in this facility. There was one staff person assigned to each floor, and the staff felt that they could do whatever they wanted to the youth. Staff fought girls, and male staff restrained female youth, which didn't feel right to me. Staff also let youth fight another youth by giving them permission to go off site of the cam so they wouldn't be seen. I also heard about someone being pepper sprayed in response to telling a staff person no. I had witnessed one of my roommates shackled for days, and afterwards, she had black and blue marks everywhere. If I act out, they would put my hands behind my back and throw me on the floor. One time, I refused to go to the main room, and a staff person body slammed me. Then they put me in a small room with just one staff person about for a whole day. The room was in a boys' hall, and I had nothing to do in there. I had eaten around breakfast, but 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., they didn't let me eat anything. Sometimes staff played favorites, and other youth would get multiple snacks or meals while I went hungry. The food was also unsafe. I found worms in my food a couple times. There was no school at the facility. We had to stay in one room all day. There was no teachers, no books, just a TV, and even that was on when a staff wanted to watch TV. There was nothing to do, and I hated going there. Youth are strip searched in these facilities. For me, I didn't like being strip searched at all. I didn't want to see anybody, I didn't want anybody to see me naked. It was very uncomfortable. When I was at the facility, at one point I had a seizure related to my medication. While I was in my hut getting ready to sleep, and my friend noticed that I was shaking and my eyes were rolling behind my head. So she notified the staff on the floor, but it took 5 to 10 minutes before anyone can help me. A man ended up coming. He wasn't even a nurse. All he did was offer me water. Another time, a staff intentionally burned me with a flat iron while she was straightening my hair. Afterwards, I was in a lot of pain and asked to see a nurse, but she wasn't there because she was only part-time. I never got to see a doctor until I went to court 4 or 5 days later. By that time, it was all scarred up. When my judge saw what happened to me, she moved me to a different floor. I had to stay in the same facility because the other placements where I was supposed to go didn't have a bed available. Even though this facility is now closed, there are other juvenile delinquent centers where youth may be going through the same thing. It is hard for youth to speak up about these things. When I was at the facility, I was too scared to open up and talk. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't think anything would be done if I ever did speak up. Why should I think anyone will help me as if they are sitting there harming me? Next, I was sent to a group home in the Poconos. In some ways, it was better than the first facility, but it was still really difficult for me. I missed my parents and family. I felt so lonely, and I didn't have anyone who loved me. Not feeling that love and being away from home is the worst feeling. I can't even describe it. I wasn't allowed to have a home pass, so I couldn't even see my mother. Eventually, I heard that my family went to a trip to Wildwood, which was our annual tradition. That hit me hard, made me realize how alone I felt. I couldn't take it anymore, and I ended up running away so I could see them. Being in placement really messed up my life. I tried to go back to the charter school I attended for 2 years before going to the placement, but they wouldn't let me back in. My only option was to do a cyber program. I didn't learn anything while I was in placement. To this day, I still have trouble in school. I ended up having to take 8th grade classes like pre-algebra that I should already have known. I also now have trust issues with adults. Going to placement changed the way I was. I was quiet, didn't want to be around anybody else. But at least once I was home from placement, I was getting all that love that I was missing for all those months. I wish I would just be able to stay home with my family the whole time. I'm speaking here for the youth that are in delinquent and child welfare centers and going through what I've been through. I want to make a change and hope that everybody has realized that these centers are not the best for youth. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lily, for your powerful testimony. We're going to hear from all of our youth advocates before asking questions. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You may proceed with your testimony.
My name is Jahad May. I am 19 years old. I'm from North Philadelphia. I am here today to share my experiences inside juvenile placements facilities in Philadelphia and my recommendations for change. Here are some of the things I like to share about myself. People don't usually ask youth who been in juvenile placements about ourselves. They don't even really look at us or who we know we are. So, I'm nervous as hell. Nobody asks me about my likes, dislikes. Sometimes they don't even see me as a person. I am an artist and athlete. I love playing sports and video games. Currently, I am involved in Evening Reporting Center, and this is my first year as a youth advocate and juvenile for justice at the Juvenile Law Center. I am interested in cybersecurity and the military. I also really enjoy playing basketball, and before placement, I was playing basketball and football, but when I got out, I couldn't go back to my old school and couldn't play. I'm speaking here today because too many black kids are being sent away for petty crimes and are being treated unfairly in placements. We're sending youth away when they should have got advocacy or support at home. I hope that judges, law enforcement, and DHS understand the impact of incarcerations on kids.
Take your time. Take your time.
My first day in the facility, I refused to be strip searched, so they called a code. The code meant they pulled me into another room with 5-6 guards, and a few of them held me down. One guard forcibly searched me. This happened more than once because I refused every time. It made me mad and made me want to defend myself, but I couldn't. I'm about to cry. I believe they should have respect that I didn't want to be strip searched. Also, they had pat downs every visitation. I also witnessed youth being restrained even for talking back and refusing to do something. When staff yelled and argued with youth, they decided they were finished arguing, and suddenly they got physical and would call code black or code blue and would jump on the youth. It wasn't most common, but it happened mostly when a staff felt like they had a problem with one of the youth. Staff also felt like they had to respond excessively to any behavior that was wrong. If one person didn't do something like cleaning up, the unit got locked down for 1 week or more. When everyone is punished for one person's mistake, it makes everyone upset and it isn't fair. When we were on lockdown, everyone had to be in their room and could only come out to eat and shower. And then it was lights off. After this, everyone came out. They would be upset, angry, enraged, and ready to fight. It made me feel weird being in placement. You have to wait for everyone to do something. At the on-ground school, I also felt the schoolwork was bad. It seemed like they only gave us work to keep us busy from doing anything. The work really didn't teach me anything. I had a teacher and a computer. But when I came home, I had to be homeschooled because no school in the Philadelphia School District would set me back. My credits from placement didn't transfer when I tried to go to a regular school outside of Philly. So I had to be homeschooled to start 12th grade on time. In school on grounds, one time I got 10 punches from a guard for not doing the schoolwork. But I wasn't really interested in the schoolwork. They kept giving work that wasn't on my grade level. Another time I was on social media, and when they called me, they tapped me on my shoulder and told me to step out of class. As soon as I stepped out the room, one guard held me, another guard punched me. Then they made me go back to class. I never told anyone at the facility because the staff who punched me would bribe me and other youth with snacks not to tell the CO, or when it happened to me, told me not to tell when I went to court. No kid should be beaten up from staff at the facility, and especially for refusing to do classwork that's not on our level. If this happened in regular school, teachers could be arrested and fired. When this stuff happened, it made me even more angry about my situation because I was sent to placement for being around a fight and knowing who was involved, not because I participated. The people who were part of the fight took a plea and all got house arrest, but I took mine to trial because I was not involved. I ended up being adjudicated and sent to placement for 3.5 months. In the same facility, I also spent time in solitary for 1 week once. They put me in solitary because someone in the cafeteria was looking at me and I felt threatened. In solitary, the whole room was cushioned, a sponge-like substance. They only checked on me when it was time for meals, and they brought me my classwork. Otherwise, there was nothing for me to do in the room, no one for me to interact with. I slept, looked at the wall, worked out in the room, and I ate. That's it, for a whole week. At once, I didn't think it would impact me, but after being in a room with nothing to do for a few minutes, it started to bother me. It made me feel weak because there was nothing to do. Nothing I could do to get out. There was only really me and the walls and the floor. At this placement, a lot of people were also physically injured, including myself. I had gotten a busted lip and broken ribs from a guard. So my social worker took me to the hospital and I was sent home on house arrest. I want my judge to understand what it was like when she didn't listen to my side of the story and made an example out of me. If you all were behind those walls and faced what we faced, would you understand how horrible it was for me, especially when I was placed for a crime that I did not know that was going to happen, but I still had to do the time. I recently found out this placement was later shut down, but despite the place being shut down, this is just one of the many placements that youth have and will continue to be sent to, and they will experience things like abuse, solitary, and poor education without being able to tell what happened. I'm not the only youth who has been sent to placement for something they did not commit. Some of my friends and peers in J4J also have gone through what I've gone through in placement. This needs to stop happening so kids don't face the same things we face. The things we face change us and can hurt us to the point where youth wants to commit suicide. Kids shouldn't be sent to placement, especially for petty crimes, and we shouldn't be abused in placement. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I know how incredibly hard that is. Thank you so much, Jihad, for your courage. Good afternoon, Quilla.
Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Quilla. I am 19, and I currently am a youth advocate with the Juveniles for Justice. Juveniles for Justice is a program through Juvenile Law Center that believes in the power of youth voices and provides programming for youth with juvenile justice and child welfare experience to create advocacy projects based on our experiences. We work to change those systems. I am so excited to have been a part of J4J for the first time this year because I have gotten to learn all about advocacy and what I could do to help better the systems. This year in J4J, we decided to address harmful conditions in placement facilities. I would really like to use my DHS experiences and become a youth mentor counselor and mentor other youth who are potentially going down the same path as I was. Currently, I work at Power Corp PHL. Before I was in placement, I enjoyed cheerleading and doing makeup, but I could not continue when I was sent to placement. Now that I am home, I want to be more involved in civil engagement with other youth. To achieve my goals, I am getting a lot of support from my case manager and the Achievement Independence Center. I am here today not only because J4J decided to work on this issue, but also because my story is like many other youths, and I want to help make a change for youth still in placement. I personally have experiences being in both the juvenile justice and child welfare systems. Part of my experiences going in and out of these systems was related to truancy and for violating my probation because of latenesses to school. What should have happened in my story is that people should have asked me why I was always late or why I felt I had to violate my probation. Instead, no one asked me and I was sent away. I was 15 when I was first sent to a juvenile detention center. The first incident I had at this facility was when I had been having a hard time sleeping and I didn't feel up to eating breakfast. I was tired and I refused to go. When I refused, the staff grabbed and twisted me out of the bed. Because it was hurting, I resisted. When I did, the staff woman swung me around, punched me, and when I defended myself, the staff facilitator who was around and was nearby saw what was happening and threw her walkie-talkie at my head. After this happened, I tried reporting what was happening between me and both the staff, but there was no disciplinary action for the staff's behavior. Instead, I lost all of my phone time, which means I couldn't talk to my family. I also was in solitary confinement for 3 days. One of the biggest part of this experience that hurts the most was that I was punished for what was happened to me, and they took all of my phone time away, and it meant that I could not talk to my family. At another placement facility, I spent 4 days in solitary in a room by myself that only had a metal bench. I did not receive any work and only received my meals throughout the day. Even after I was removed from solitary, staff continued to put me on restrictions where I was mostly sent back to my room after activities or eating. The education in this facility was also at a low standard. In school, we did artwork every day, and it was basically free time. I felt it did not challenge me, and I did not learn anything new or what I should have while I was there. I spent time in a residential facility through the child welfare system. I ended up being sent there because of truancy problems in school. The schoolwork I received was at a 5th grade level, despite that I was in 11th grade at the time. This was not just my experience, but just what happened to all the youth there, no matter what grade they were in. We all had 5th grade work and we didn't receive grades. However, I started speaking to my coworker about my experience in school on the on-school grounds that I had attended, and after a few months I was retested and was told I could go to an off-campus school in the area. I was really glad that I could go to an off-ground school because the education was so much better there, but I also felt a lot of pressure because no one thought that I would graduate because I was in foster care. I did graduate with my diploma. I stayed at that facility until I signed myself out of care at age 18. But because I had no home to go to, I am now back in extended foster care. What happened to me in placement should not have happened and should not happen to any other youth. It was wrong, and people should have asked me what was going on at home instead of sending me away to placement. I should have received more support for me to stay in school and at home with my family.
Thank you so much, Quilla, for that powerful testimony. Do my council members have any questions?
I just want to take a moment to thank the three of you for coming and sharing your testimony. It takes a lot of courage to come into a building. You don't know anyone in this building, to be under the cameras and the lights, to really shed light on a very, very critically important issue. And so I want to encourage you also beyond today that you can still follow your goals, your dreams, your aspirations. I was on probation as a juvenile for some things I got involved in. I recently gave the judge who put me on probation a city council resolution honoring him in this very same room. So I didn't let the circumstances that I got involved in as a juvenile stop me from following my dreams, regardless of the neighborhood that I grew up in, regardless of the family issues I dealt with as a young man. I mentioned earlier, I have 2 degrees from college, a certificate from Ivy League University, and I continue to advocate to improve the quality of life for all young people who have gone down that path, and so they can recognize that they deserve a second chance, and it's not the end of the world regardless of your current situation or the situations you have been through. And in terms of your testimony, the individuals who are up here at this table take this issue very serious and know that your testimony is not in vain. We will be aggressively looking into this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Your stories are deeply compelling, and they really tug at your heart if you have one. Secondly, I would remind you that where you start has nothing to do with where you end up. Nothing at all. You've shown courage, you've shown moxie, you care about your future, you care about yourselves, and most importantly, you care about your education. So let that be an inspiration for you, because life ain't over, and many of us get 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th chances to get it right. Many of us get 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th chances to get it right. So be encouraged. Be encouraged. I thank the counselor for the work that you do. It's hard, but it's stories like this that remind us that the work we do is important and it gives us purpose. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. I did have one question for Jihad, if I could. If you could just stay for one moment. So when you came back to school after placement, did you face challenges getting credit for the past schoolwork that you had done?
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit more about why you had problems getting credit for that work that required you to be homeschooled?
Well, the school I previously went to, they lost all my transcripts. So the only type of transcripts they had is when I was living in Delaware at the time, going to school in Delaware.
And that's why you said that they had no record, no formal record of you doing any of the work, and thus you had to.
Yes.
That's why you had to be homeschooled?
Yes.
Okay. That's a very serious issue for us. Obviously, as you know, many of these placement facilities do get a significant amount of support to ensure that your education continues in those facilities. And Lily, I think you also spoke to this before when we spoke earlier too, about your struggle to have the appropriate coursework. I think you mentioned algebra when we met. And can you talk a little bit about the kind of quality of education that you received in your facility?
So the first facility I went to didn't have no type of education. The second facility that I went to...
Does that mean you never took a class, or you didn't have any formal schooling, no teacher who came through?
No teacher, nothing. The second placement I did go to school, but they was not giving me pre-algebra that I needed. So when I went home, they needed pre-algebra. They needed my reports for pre-algebra, my report card and stuff like that, and they didn't have no type of report card, and I was not even doing pre-algebra. So when I went homeschooled, it was really hard for me to do pre-algebra, and they already said that I should have already been known pre-algebra before coming to charter to cyber school for 9th grade. So it was really hard for me to get to pre-algebra, because pre-algebra is a really hard skill to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really challenging for me.
Thank you so much. And Quilla, I think you mentioned a lot of experiences about being so far away. Was anyone from your family able to visit you while you were in placement, just to see how you were doing?
I had DHS workers coming out to see me, but family related, no. Mostly my mother couldn't make it that far. Ambler, PA, they just couldn't make it that far.
And what do you think we could have done better rather than putting you so far away for placement? What do you wish we could have done differently?
Well, make the placement facilities a little bit more local, instead of having us travel all the way out to a whole nother area, I think.
Yeah,
Just so we wouldn't be far away. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Thank you very much. I had the chance to meet the three of you a little over a month ago, and you and some of your other colleagues and peers, yes, we see you in the back. And this hearing happened largely because of the power of your testimony. And as I said earlier, the courage that you showed to be able to speak to some very painful things that happened, and to call us to accountability and consciousness that we've got to do better and be better for you. So we're sorry that we couldn't have been there when we should have been. And, thank you for being with us while we try to help figure out something better for other young people who are going through a lot of other issues too. So thank you very much. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Would you like to make testimony? If you could just say your name into the record. Thank you.
Marcia Hopkins. I'm the Youth Advocacy Program Manager at the Juvenile Law Center. I just want to add a little bit to the stories that the young people shared, is that one thing that I always get from talking with them is that a lot of the reasons why they went into placement are things that could have been taken care of in the community. So one thing I want to elevate about Quilla's story is that a lot of her truancy issues were already heightened because her school was an hour and a half away. And there may have been some family issues or things that were already happening that if their families received support, or if the young person received support in the current schools that they were attending, I just don't believe that they would have been sent away. And so really thinking about how we can offer services in the Philadelphia community to tackle these issues, because I really think that kids are being criminalized and incarcerated for reasons that are normal adolescent behavior or things that we can fix within our community. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the advocacy that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the next panel forward?
Commissioner Cynthia Figueroa providing testimony, joined by Karen Lynch and Commissioner Joan Ernie.
Welcome. Good afternoon, Commissioner. If you could just say your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Cynthia Figueroa, Department of Human Services Commissioner. Before I start my testimony, I want to personally recognize Lily, Hid, and Quilla for sharing your incredible story with us. Those words definitely touch me and some of the really hard aspects of this work that we are all committed to. And so to all the youth that are here, the words of your experiences are the things that I take home with me that I believe will drive us to being a better system. And so you have a commitment from the Department of Human Services and myself as a commissioner is that we have to get this better. We have to get this right. Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Figueroa, Commissioner of the City of the Department of Human Services. Thank you, Chairwoman Helen Gim and Vice Chairwoman Blondell Reynolds-Brown, the entire Children and Youth Committee of Philadelphia City Council for the opportunity to testify today. Thank you to all the young people who are here and provided testimony. It's their voices that are most important, and we have so much work that we need to do together. We must do better. DHS is committed to being a partner in leading the needed change. We are aligned with the youth, advocate partners, supporters, and critics in wanting our youth to stay in their communities of origin and live in family settings. To begin this work, I will outline the current reality for these priorities and how DHS needs your help and the help of the entire community to make this possible. First, I want to publicly thank the Juvenile Law Center and the Youth Fostering Change and Juveniles for Justice groups. I want to thank them for advocating for the issues of congregate care. One of the highlights has been meeting with the young people and hearing specifically their perspectives. The dialogues we've had as part of these meetings has helped inform some of the changes that DHS has implemented, including changes that we plan to make related to our evaluation and assessment of congregate care providers. I also want to recognize the efforts of the advocates who've agreed to work alongside in partnership with DHS to develop a coalition to address the issues that are presented during this hearing. Today, 1,313 Philadelphia youth are in congregate care. Of this number, 715 are in dependent congregate care and 598 are in delinquent congregate care. 98% of all youth in congregate care are in Pennsylvania. The tenets of improving outcomes for children, a model for dependent youth, identify that we want for youth who are in all of our systems, whether dependent or delinquent. We want to continue to decrease congregate care. We want youth to live close to home and in family settings and with kin. Since implementing improving outcomes for children, we've realized significant gains in the child welfare system. We've reduced the number of dependent youth in congregate care. We're at an all-time low of 12%. That is a reduction from 22% in 2013. More dependent children and youth are in foster and kinship care and live close to home. 76 live within 10 miles of their home of origin, and 51% live within 5 miles. 47% of all dependent youth live with kin. Prior to improving outcomes for children, that was 32% of youth. Similar gains have been made in the juvenile justice system, where there has been a 36% reduction in congregate care placement since 2015. Additionally, through alternatives to placement and arrest, like the Evening Reporting Center and the Police School Diversion Program, we're starting to make an impact. Since the start of the diversion program in 2014, 1,800 youth have been diverted from arrest, and most have been referred to our intensive prevention services. Just this year, we started including summary retail theft as a category for diverting youth from arrest. We've heard testimony today from youth about their experiences in these facilities. We are committed to improving the quality of care and working with our state partners, the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, to hold providers accountable. When it's clear that services are not meeting our standards, we close intake. We have closed sites that we do not believe serve the best interests of our youth. However, we recognize that there is a need to further enhance the evaluation process to ensure that there is always quality services. And to this end, we are working towards the development of a more robust tool that will incorporate youth's voice into future assessments. In addition, we're working to expand service options, and last year we issued 8 proposals for Philadelphia-based programs. For some categories, like community-based detention and delinquent group homes, there were limited interest from providers to open programs in Philadelphia. However, we have been able to open 2 new dependent group homes and emergency shelters to better serve youth closer to home. In addition, we secured funding to open an additional evening reporting center. Our efforts have also focused on recruiting resource parents who are willing to be foster care parents to older youth. Our vision, in partnership with the advocacy community, youth, and other city departments, is to work to keep children and youth in their homes and in their communities. For youth who need more intensive services, we need to create local options and expand existing prevention services and placement alternatives. We have a variety of strategies that we plan to use to achieve this goal and need your help. We, DHS, plan to be a system leader to support the advocacy group and coalition's vision to decrease out-of-home placement. We will continue to fund and expand alternatives to placement and detention, continue to fund and support intensive prevention services and alternatives to arrests. DHS continues to close programs that do not meet our standards. We are 100% committed to do this and stand by our commitment to close intake for non-compliance. We will continue to issue requests for proposals for services in Philadelphia County. We will require that all new sites selected for congregate care coordinate with the School District of Philadelphia. In partnership with Casey Family Programs, we are working on the tool that I mentioned prior to more effectively evaluate the quality of our services. We also commit to continue to strengthen the existing partnership with the Department of Human Services Education Support Center and the School District of Philadelphia. We believe it's better for youth to remain in their communities. That's why we believe DHS-funded services like the Achieving Independence Study, Work Ready, Power Core, and E3 are all services that we support. Services in the community make it easier for youth to stay in their school of origin and with fewer education disruptions. The commitment to serve youth in their communities of origin must be a citywide priority. Making this goal a reality requires more resource parents willing to provide foster care to older youth, advocacy at a state level with the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. Support funding for potential pilot programs and make this a part of the needs-based plan and budget process. We need quality organizations to provide services in Philadelphia. We need the ability to zone and license the sites, and we need neighborhoods willing to accept these programs. In closing, the next steps for us is to work with a coalition to bring our youth safely home. We commit to this work as part of the coalition to develop a comprehensive plan to move this work forward together. I firmly believe that with all the partners working together, we can make a difference in the service delivery in the lives of young people. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Dr. Lynch?
Good afternoon. For the record, I am Karen Lynch with the School District of Philadelphia. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I join my colleague, Commissioner Figueroa, in extending to the young people who spoke today a sincere thanks and appreciation for their courage, their willingness to share intimate details, and for their perseverance, and for what I know. I heard your comments particularly. This is the beginning, this is not the end. This is where we start, this is not where we're going to end up. And I thank you, Councilwoman, for reminding us all of that message, because it's extremely important. Thank you for this hearing today and the opportunity to talk about these issues, Councilwoman Gim. And with that, I will share just a couple of things. We support the recommendations that have been made by Cynthia Figueroa today. In particular, we very much support opportunities for children to remain closer to home and, in fact, inside of Philadelphia. We urge that opportunity, and we have committed to providing educational services within the facilities or the programs, hopefully programs and not facilities, that are located within the city to support young people. We spend in the School District of Philadelphia a little less than $30 million a year to educate children who are going to locations all across the state, and it is an investment that we think that if they were closer to home, we'd be in a much better position to, and they would be in a much better position to receive an education that is better than what we think that they are receiving otherwise. We particularly want to avoid silos. You talked about that earlier. We want to be a collaborative organization that works with others. We have found that to be our success in the past and currently, and so we are very, very eager. We partner with DHS on a good number of services and programs that are related to ensuring that children receive much better services than they do. And we know that we can do better. We know that we can make a difference. We also collaborate with CBH. My partner to the left is here. And we know we have to do better. I also wanted to share that there is an opportunity in this issue for the state to do much better than what they do right now. We come from a jurisdiction not very far from here in Maryland, where the state regulates this process much better than is regulated here in Pennsylvania. The state sets not just licensing requirements, but also funding requirements, salary charges. And that state also monitors the efforts of providers of service much more closely than what is the experience that we have in Pennsylvania. We know that when the state is involved, then jurisdictions all across the state have a much greater onus, and there is greater accountability and responsiveness when we're talking about the courses that are offered, the rates that are charged, the conditions that exist, the way that children are treated, and the experiences they have. So we urge that in your efforts, there's also consideration of increasing the importance with the state on what role they have and what opportunity they have. The young man who spoke earlier talked about credits and the transfer of credits and what transcripts look like when they come to us. Our process in the district is if there's any opportunity to include the credits, if there's any opportunity to look at a course title and extend credits, we try and do so. Too frequently, we don't receive the records. The courses are not courses that are credit bearing, and we see that the experiences that students have is not one where they are taking the courses that are at their level or their ability. Another trend that we see is that that students will leave as general education students and come back as special education students. We recognize that this is because the providers of service see an opportunity to increase the rate of serving children, and so when that rate is higher, when that student is special education identified, that rate that they receive will be higher. We have in the past few years increased our accountability to our portion of this effort, which is primarily to pay for the educational services for children that we do not place. We have done everything from ensuring that the costs that they are charging are within reason and more standardized and not for services that have not been provided. We recognize that children who are in these facilities across the state in instances can be going to an on-ground school. In other instances, they could be going to a school within their community where they are not familiar with anyone. Their experience and their backgrounds are very, very different than the people that are there, and it's not a great opportunity. So in closing, I would share that this is something that we take very, very seriously. We are positioned to do better and to do more than we have in the past, that we are working very, very closely, as I said, with our partners, and that we aim to be a good participant and a good partner in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Vice Chair, Councilwoman Brown,
Yes.
do you have any questions for the panel?
Okay. Good morning. Gee whiz, it's really afternoon, isn't it? So the good news I've heard is that 98% of our young people are in Pennsylvania. Speak to me about the difference between congregate placement and residential placement. And I would ask only that you keep your responses tight, because I have several, and I need to be able to punt the ball to the chairwoman so she can punt it back. Okay?
So I'll try to do my best, Councilwoman.
Please.
So Congregate refers to residential placement. So it's a term used for various different kinds. So emergency, group home, those are terms that we use when we collectively refer to an out-of-home placement where it's not a home base, is when we refer to congregate care.
So are they synonymous?
Yeah, so instead of saying institution, group home, emergency shelter, we say congregate care to apply. There's different levels of care that happen, and there's different things that happen in those particular facilities, but congregate care is more of a universal term used for residential placement.
Okay. Relying on the testimony offered by the young people, and actually looking back at my own professional experience where when I worked with the city, I was in the division that was responsible for going out and evaluating programs, providing services to children. And so with that context, what type of evaluative or evaluation protocols, procedures, standards are in place for anybody taking care of one of our child in congregate care? What are the protocols?
So we could send you, because it's an exhaustive list in terms of the requirements, and there's a few different elements. This is part of the confusion that always, the facilities are all licensed by the state. So they are required to meet 3,800 regulations that, in which there are also site visits and compliance that happens related to that visit. Where we have co-funded programs with community behavioral health. We've actually moved to sharing some of our work in terms of providers. So I would say we're much better. When you asked earlier what's better now is that we work in key partnership with CBH around the visitation and issues with our residential treatment facilities.
So what red flags do you get when we hear of instances in children being locked in a solitary confinement on metal benches? Where is that fact in reports? Do we get that kind of information from the state? And then what's the consequence of that kind of treatment of young people?
So there's a lot of different ways to answer this. One is that we do get information directly from the providers. Sometimes we don't get information directly from the providers. There is a requirement that the state is to notify us of things that happen outside of Philadelphia County that may not be brought to our attention. This is another area I've spoken actually with Councilwoman Gim quite a bit about, is that a number of the facilities that we use are also used by other counties. So there could be an incident that happens with a child that's not from Philadelphia County, but I would still want to know that incident occurred.
Positively, yes.
Right now, there's a delay in the notification of a critical incident. We have made it explicitly clear to our providers that we expect to hear from them directly, and a number of them will provide us information as it occurs well before we hear anything from the state. We also work with our advocate partners. The defenders will bring things to our attention that they've been made aware of by the children that they serve.
Okay, let's drill down. What are the improvements with regards to the linkages between the school district and DHS, and that goes to, gee whiz, continue to strengthen partnership with the DHS Education Support Center and the School District of Philadelphia. Is there an office? Is there a department? Are there professionals specifically with the responsibility of tracking, monitoring everything that's happening with DHS children and youth at the school district?
Yes, so we have an education support center that is physically located at 440. It's a pretty sizable unit, and as well as we also have social workers connected to this unit that are deployed to a number of the schools in the Philadelphia School District, and they work to help navigate the issues with any children who are in care. One of the improvements that we've made is that in terms of the initial placement, doing an assessment in partnership with the school district to determine how we can maintain that child in their school of origin. And if we can't, what's the planning for transportation, transfer, et cetera, when we can stay within the district. And we've been working on improving the process by which when a child is sent to a placement.
Okay, so that was not in place 10 years ago, so that is progress. Let's fast forward. It's 72 months from now, it's 5 years from now. Karen Lynch has gone on to her dream gig in Hawaii, okay? What do we have in place that ensures that the work that's been done under Dr. Height's administration is intact long after those professionals go to Hawaii? Because this happened because of the commitment of the current administration. What systemically is in place to ensure that after your departure, that these new protocols and procedures, that this education support center is in place forever?
So for the record, I will share that this is my dream job.
Okay, welcome.
And I love Philadelphia, and it's not in my plan just yet to move on to something else. But in all seriousness, I think it's really important for what I call roads and bridges to exist. There has to be processes that are in place. We talk about sharing information. We talk about the processes that exist on both sides. The Education Support Center is, in fact, physically located. That does not happen overnight, and it doesn't happen easily. It happens as a result of a process that is including a lease agreement and funding and commitment. And even once individuals are co-located, it's absolutely essential that they are sharing the work, sharing the information, and focused on how they are addressing the issues and needs of children that we are serving in common. So the short answer to your question is that in order for it to be sustainable over time, it's absolutely important to be able to build those roads and bridges and those processes within our systems so that they don't fall apart when one person, two people, three people walk away.
I would just add that there is an existing memorandum of understanding that outlines a data agreement between the Department of Human Services and the school district, and that lives beyond the existing people who are sitting at the table, and it's very much aligned with access to information that folks at the Education Support Center have. So that's like an actual physical live document that exists between the two systems that, regardless of what happens tomorrow, that's an element that keeps that infrastructure going.
Is there a date attached to it?
I can't remember if it's renewable on a 10-year basis,
Okay.
but it's not a year-to-year.
Okay. I'll pass the ball back to Madam Chairwoman. In the cases of the staffers who engaged in that kind of conduct, what are the consequences? Was that investigated? What happened?
So not knowing what particular or talking about an exact case, when we're made aware of a situation, it is required that the staff member involved who is going to be investigated by the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, that there is what's called a plan of safety, and so that staff person is supposed to be removed physically from the physical plant. Again, that is something that we work very closely with the state, because we've seen some diversion from that from time to time, and then there is an actual child abuse investigation done on that staff member.
I see.
Based on the outcome by the state's investigation will lead to, in a number of times, there have been positions taken in the report that don't necessarily align with what I would like to see. And so we have told providers that we refuse to pay for that staff person to remain on our contract. In some instances, we're the majority payer of that provider, so that kind of is a clear message. If they're not found indicated of child abuse, we can't tell somebody to fire that staff person, but we can say we will not pay for them.
I see. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So once again, I just want to acknowledge the work that the three of you in particular have done, Commissioner Figueroa, Joan, and Karen. Thank you very much for the work you've done on taking a look at this issue. I just wanted to clarify for Commissioner Figueroa, just acknowledge your support in your testimony about recognizing how complicated this issue is. It's been going on for a very long time. And we have a lot of work to do along, not just within the city end or council's end or the advocacy end, but really as that coalition. to talk about what it would take to, bring our kids home. And I think I heard you, but I just wanted to make it clear that you have a commitment to creating that coalition of advocates and city agencies and potentially others to see about what we can do to take a look at those efforts. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also wanted to thank both you and Joan Ernie on your work in shortly after the Wordsworth situation in making sure that you visited all these residential treatment facilities in which our young people are held. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about those visits, the assessments that you've seen, and some reflections on that. And if you could just say your name for the record, Joan Ernie.
So my name is Joan Ernie, and I'm actually the CEO of Community Behavioral Health, not the commissioner. Commissioner Jones might take some pause about that. So appreciate being here, and just want to echo the amazing voices of our youth always inspire and I think change what we do. Two things I wanted to just highlight. One is that I think you hear from all of us a real village approach, that we have all the same commitments to bring young people back closer to home. We have the same commitment to make it a safe and secure environment, to have community options, and to have a future. And I think those are kind of systems goals that we have really worked hard to have a lot of synergy between us and with all our child-serving partners. We see our role at times as some of the convening to bring folks together for our young people. Specifically to follow up on the tragedy at Wordsworth, it really does make us all take stock. And council's request for us to go out to the residential programs. We formed a multidisciplinary team. We had young adults and family members on the team. They made significant contributions, things that we would miss, similar to what you hear here from the young people. They would say, well, now what is that exactly over there? And it turned out it was a quiet room, which we don't permit. So I think it's really tremendous. And when we do our monitoring, trying to include young adults and family members who really have a certain perspective had really made a difference for us. We found that there, as with most things, there were both strengths and challenges at each of the residential programs. We went to visit 18 that were here in the state of Pennsylvania. We don't use many out-of-state resources anymore, which is positive. And most of anything that we are using at this point is in New Jersey, so we try to keep kids close to home. And we had a number of findings, and I think there are things that we are actively working on. I think one of the things that we found is an issue around workforce. And we are making, I think, strides on trying to pull together with our provider community and our advocates, what is the workforce that we need, and how do we make sure they get trained adequately and really are able to be committed to public sector work. How do we keep them safe as both an employee and also feeling really good about the work and the commitment. So we had some best practices associated with that. And so we're doing a community of practice session. We've done one with agencies. We're doing a second, and we're deep diving into workforce and finances, et cetera. Secondly, we've created a lot of infrastructure, particularly with DHS, around the reviews of the agencies ongoing. So it couldn't be just a one-time effort. We now routinely and monthly really meet and share provider information, look for those red flags, identify areas that we might have concerns about, and then really try to have a plan going forward. We also review young people who are in inpatient or in settings that we're not, where we want to move them on, and we're doing that on a regular basis. We also have found that, we do have to have some attention to restraints. The Wordsworth death was as a result of a really poorly enacted restraint. And so we have really seen some promising work. Our goal is to have no restraints. So psychiatric residential treatment facilities are a little different than a general congregate care setting because it has some additional requirements. However, there are also restraints that certainly happen there. And so we embarked on a lot of attention, as well as provided some tools and some new training opportunities that really are targeted to eliminate restraints. And we've seen a pretty significant reduction. It's not solely due to us, because we believe the agencies have really stepped up their work as well. But we're really pleased with the direction it's going, and with an overarching goal of being restraint-free.
Point of information on these, you call them psychiatric treatment facilities. Are there any in the city of Philadelphia designed specifically to serve young people?
There is currently only one program that's in Philadelphia since Wordsworth closed, and it really treats a small population of individuals who have mental health and intellectual disabilities. We issued an RFP, request for proposal. We had 2 organizations who applied for the RFP, and we're working through moving them forward. They will develop 2 small residential programs in Philly, one for 9 boys and one for 9 girls, because that will, again, help us stay closer to home. And our commitment is to continue to build more community infrastructure. So that was part of the other lessons learned is we can't have big facilities, we can't have mixed facilities. We need to have our kids in communities attached to the local supports and schools and family that they need. And so we've built a whole crisis system up to try to respond differently to crises, and we're trying to build more both trauma-impacted care, et cetera. So
Thank you.
we think we're making some progress as a result of that, but we are not going to let up our attention to this.
It's my understanding that after you visited, you did decide to suspend intake at a couple of the facilities.
Correct.
Is that accurate? Could you
Correct.
tell us how many after your visit that you decided to suspend? Was it 2?
It was either 2 or 3. One of the things we did at each facility was we did review tapes of, if there were tapes available, we reviewed tapes of restraints. I know that at least in 2 instances, we found the tapes, indicated to us that it was not an appropriate restraint. So we did suspend, and that's a regular activity. If we have a restraint, we do close admissions until we are able to kind of see a record, talk to the young person, talk to staff, et cetera, and see what really happened.
And are those facilities still closed today?
They are not.
Or have we continued to suspend intake?
No, this intake's open.
Intake's back open.
We have one that's continued.
Could you just speak into the microphone, please, Commissioner?
Just for the point of clarity, that we, DHS, in terms of use of one setting, we continue to have intake closed on one facility on the western side of the state.
Could you name that facility?
It's George Jr.
Okay. And then in December, I think we also suspended, we ended a
closed.
contract with another facility. Could you?
We closed 2 facilities that were operated by Vision Quest. We closed the community-based detention facility, as well as there was a group home facility that was operated also northwestern part of the state.
And were those based on safety reasons?
Yeah, they were based on the quality and our feeling that the kids were going to be safer in areas that we were, and in one instance, as you know, we had to make that decision quickly, and we had to temporarily bring the children back. Some of them were at the juvenile justice facility as we found the appropriate placements for them.
Yeah, that was a situation that we were trying to deal with together, and I appreciate your attention.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, that's another one of those circumstances where the facility, while we had an opportunity to visit youth on a monthly basis, there were challenges happening in that facility that the state was aware of that we were not notified of until things had really gotten to a really poor place. And then we were left no choice but to act in a very expedited manner.
And I think during your visits, could you speak a little bit as to what you felt your capacity was to evaluate the quality of the educational program at these facilities?
So we, at the time, because it was CBH and DHS, we only inquired in terms of the types of, certainly DHS doesn't have jurisdiction to actually evaluate the educational offerings. That's definitely something that's on the future horizon, is how do we coordinate those efforts differently? How do we work with PDE? So we saw, like Joan would tell you, a variety, a really tremendous sort of from district run to private to some of the examples that our young people talked about.
And again, for clarity, I think this is an issue that we've been, deeply concerned about, but it's my understanding the School District of Philadelphia does not have oversight over the quality of education of the facilities or is able to currently at this time evaluate the educational program at any of the residential treatment facilities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we had heard, as some of us have noted, PDE only takes a look at the Pennsylvania Department of Education only looks at the educational programs once every 6 years, and it's our understanding that they primarily look at it in terms of their ability to meet the needs of students with IEPs, but don't necessarily evaluate it against the quality of instruction, grade to grade, or standard to standard within each school district. Is that correct?
Yes, that's our understanding.
Okay. I think we heard today, Ms. Lynch, from students like Jihad and Lily who talked about really troubling situations, including Jihad said he had completely missing records. He had no credit for work that had been completed. Lily discussing that she spent months at a facility in which absolutely no educational program was given. What does the school district do when a youth returns from placement to establish whether there have been any violations of the educational program and needs? What is our capacity to do on this end? Like, are we even able to interview the students and ask them what's happened, or at least help them get their records?
So yes, in fact, we have transitional services in this next school year. We are enhancing our transitional services so that we can spend more time with students before they are transferred or enrolled in schools within the School District of Philadelphia. What we find frequently is that the records are missing essential documents. We make calls, we make inquiries. It's really important for there to be transcripts that include coursework that is transferable, and the content of the course and the description of the course is frequently not there. So we do make calls in order to find out. We send correspondence in order to find out. We establish contacts at the various locations in order to find out what was the course, what was the course offering, and whether or not we can offer credit transfer.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we talk about doing this coalition and/or task force, whatever we want to call it, to take a look at the situation around the institutional placements, this is one of the areas that we want to figure out, because in fact these individuals are paid. Is that right? Are they paid per diem by the School District of Philadelphia for the educational program?
Yes.
Ms. Lynch? Okay, so do you know how much we pay them per diem?
The individuals who work for the district who did this type of work?
No. For the contracts with the residential treatment facilities, the School District of Philadelphia is obligated to pay them a per diem rate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do we know how much that per diem rate is? Does it vary?
It varies from, it varies according to the provider of the service.
Yeah, and I know that we have a little bit of questions about the exact amount of money. I think there was a back and forth with the CFO about some clarity. The district's budget book, for example, says $78 million in institutional placement. There's questions about whether that does include about $25 million that goes into special education placement, but it's a little bit confusing right now, but it is at least in the tens of millions of dollars that we've got with these young people that, that we expect them to get an education for that amount.
Yes, we estimate that it's something slightly less than $30 million a year.
Yeah.
How much? It's hard to tell. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I want to thank the three of you for your partnership. Joan, please.
If you can indulge me in just one moment, I did want to highlight something that I think is so positive and I think is indicative of the strong work as a result of some of what we've done. The Hi-Fi Rap team, which is over there on the side, it includes a family member and a young person, as well as a coordinator, and their role is to assist young people to get them in community. And we decided to do a little bit something different as a result of our reviews. We partnered with DHS to have a child find, so that these are young people who often don't have anyone. They don't have a foster family, or no one has been able to find. So our team, along with DHS, really looks to find an opportunity for these young people to come back home and have a life. And we've had already one success story, and so we're really excited about the opportunity to really do things differently and have some great successes.
Yeah, thank you
Just
very
wanted to
much.
share that.
One other quick question, Commissioner Figueroa. Could you clarify before when Councilmember Reynolds Brown asked the question about what requirements of notice when a child is, put in solitary, restrained, injured, anything like that? You mentioned that these situations are self-reported by the agency to DHS. Is that correct?
To PADHS.
To the state.
Yes,
and
and
then
we
to
have
DHS.
subsequently asked to make sure that, in particular, where we have contracts, that they also notify us.
Okay.
But
And when
they're required by law to report it to PADHS.
And when you said there's a delay, how long can that delay range from? Like the outer end?
So I can only speak to what I've witnessed in my time, and it can be anywhere from 15 days to 60 days, 90 days.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much to the three of you. Thank you for your partnership. We have one more question first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleague, Councilman Curtis Jones Jr. Thank you very much, Councilman, for joining us. And please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing and raising this important issue. But I would be remiss if I didn't cite two things. Number one, you have the hardest job in the city of Philadelphia. And I recognize that mostly because I deal with the criminal justice side of things with my colleague. But I was educated by Ms. Gray, who will also educate all of us in this room, that this is the flip side of the coin. That if good things happen here, there are better outcomes going forward for young people. If bad things happen here, there is a predictability that there will be bad outcomes. I literally am late because I met with a person, won't say male, female, who, HIPAA laws, but they were going through those kinds of crises and are just now coming out of that cloud to realize, okay, maybe I have a shot at getting my stuff together. The second thing I want to say is that I appreciate, Commissioner, there's a group called Forget Me Not that you guys went out to see. They were a community-based organization, I believe, brought in York.
Yes.
A bunch of folks who had no funding, but just wanted to do good things for young people in that area. And by the way, that is not my district, which is like totally uncharacteristic for me. But they were doing such good things that we went out to take a look at them. And now they are a part of the system because they were, in fact, penetrating that hard case issue in that neighborhood. So I want to thank you and say that there are certain jobs that are indispensable. They are hard jobs, and it's not the glitz and glamour part of government. You don't put out fires and things like that that make heroes and sheroes out of you. But I just want you to know, at least for me, that I recognize the difficulty of your job, and thank God for you when I call when people are in crisis. Because all of the elected officials swearing in the world does not make me prepared to handle some of the things you have. So I'm saying thank you on the record.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you very much, Councilman. The council, excuse me, sorry, one more. Councilmember Reynolds Brown.
I'll just stay seated till you say.
Rhetorical question and then a very brief comment. Geography and logistics aside, when it comes to educating young people who have these extraordinary circumstances, at some point there was a charter school that captured young people in that circumstance. I know that it closed. I don't fully know why, but I know it had great value because I visited it many times to speak to those young people, and the teachers, they were saviors to those kids. And so my rhetorical question is it financially more economical to place the money there than the $31 million that's being spent for students, well, that's across the state in education. So that's a think about it question. Secondly, meeting for meeting's sake is unproductive. So to pull together a task force will be important, My historical experience, having worked closely with Mayor Street for the Blue Ribbon Commission, we met for a solid year. We came up with recommendations. We put those recommendations in place, and then they were executed. So there needs to be a beginning, and there needs to be an end that's attached to very specific goals related to the type of testimony we're hearing today. To get a report and then place it on the shelf wastes everybody's time. So I'm for meetings, but I'm not for meetings for meetings' sake. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Will the clerk please call up the next panel? Yes, there will be time at the end for additional testimony. Will the clerk please call the next panel up?
Keir Bradford Gray, Chief Defender, joined by Lisa Campbell, Ellen Sapper, Catherine Vingradis, Leola Hardy, Representative Vanessa Lowry Brown, Mara McInerney, and Gabriella Labella.
How this works, but y'all can always change chairs, okay? When you need to testify. You can always change chairs when you need to testify. Somebody can come back. Okay. Let's see. I think you guys are first.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that little delay. We really welcome you here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bradford Gray, for being here, as well as the other advocates. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here this afternoon, and thank you so much for this hearing. I think it's really important, and I want to start off by saying that we're not here to point fingers. We're here to come to some resolution and solutions, and we've been working with a number of these agencies to do just that. We all have an ownership in this, and we all want to fix it, so I definitely want to start off with saying that. I will introduce myself. My name is Keir Bradford Gray, and I am the Chief Public Defender of the Defender Association, where we do represent youth, both on what we would call dependency. Those are children that have been deemed to be abused and neglected. I am here with my remarkable team of lawyers and social workers from our Child Advocate Unit, and I can say this, I'm here as the face presenting this, but the work is being done by these professionals who are committed every day. And we do recognize that while we're doing the work that we want to do and that we need to do, we have further to go. And we're always willing to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for these young children who are brave enough here to talk about their experiences. I'm also here joined today by my staff on our delinquent unit, and that is Mr. Elton Anglada, Lisa Campbell, Ellen Sapper, who has a new role, which is to look at dispositional reviews. So meaning what she does is she works with the kids and figures out what their experience has been in the placements that they have been in. And we've actually hired a fellow to do interviews for these youth to talk about some of the things that they probably wouldn't say while they were in the placements. We used to go out, and actually we have a contract with DHS where they provide us funding to go out and visit our children while they're in placement. But what we found is that when we go out there and we ask them, how is their experience, they're really afraid to talk to us while they're in that placement for fear of retaliation. So we found that it's a better model to talk to them once they're out, and we will be compiling all of that data and bringing it to the forefront so that we can find out some solutions to some of the glaring things that we've seen. I'm also here with our education specialist. Like I said, one of the things that the Defender Association lawyers understand is that we cannot do everything and we don't know everything. And one of the main drivers of our juvenile justice system's access to our kids have been special education needs. So we did hire a woman, Catherine Vengretis, and she's been amazing to our lawyers to understand what the school district must do before we send kids to our juvenile justice system. And we've been instrumental in getting cases stopped from criminal prosecution and getting the school to better address those needs. We can do it much more. Thank you so much for that, because I'm very proud of that. We can do it much more, but the more we understand what's driving the behaviors, the better off we'll be in coming to resolutions. And then lastly, we have our policy analyst who's been doing amazing work, and her name is Leola Hardy. She actually did reach out to Juvenile Law Center to build this coalition called Closer to Home. And Helen Gim, your office has been involved, and yours too, Councilwoman Brown. And we've been looking at models of people who had less reliance on placement. Now, with that said, I'm going to go into just a brief PowerPoint demonstration just to kind of illustrate some of the information that we provided in our written testimony. This just talks about how many children we represent, so we really have an understanding of a vast majority of our youth as to what their issues are related to coming into our systems and what their needs are. Unfortunately, some of our resources do not fit the needs, especially as it relates to our young girls. You can flip to the next one. Now, before I show this is kind of illustrative of the point that when we're talking about using placement, we need to, when I hear that we're looking at compliance, it's not just compliance we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about culture. Some of the things that we have seen before in terms of culture is that our youth are shipped all over the country. And in some of these areas, they don't have the ability to understand some of the urban needs that our children have, some of their neighborhoods, some of their experiences, all the things that we would think and we would hope that children can identify with those who are responsible for rehabilitating them with. And so we have children who I believe are overly disciplined.
children who are overly dealt with in such aggressive manners, and it only exacerbates their feeling of worthlessness and doesn't give them an opportunity. Now, before I show this video, I want to give anyone in the audience an opportunity to leave if you want. There are going to be some disturbing visuals in this video. The faces are blacked out, so we can't tell who they are. We've gotten written and expressed permission from our client to show this video. This is going to feature what happened in a situation, in a case where it was recommended that a child of ours go to placement because of mental health needs. Once they got there, there were some issues related to the interaction with the staff. The staff had some physical ways of dealing with our child, and our child was actually arrested and put into adult custody and sat in adult custody for about 2 months until Ellen Sapper was able to get the video, show that it wasn't our child that actually was aggressive toward the staff. She gave the video to our DHS partners, and DHS reached out to the district attorney in Pike County, where all charges were dropped. Unfortunately, at the time that the case went to court, our child was now considered an adult and sat in adult prison, which had a lot of psychological trauma on him. So this is a state facility. It is not a local facility, but if anyone would like to leave, I'll give you an opportunity now. Otherwise, we're going to show the video. All right.
And Ms. Badford-Gray, for clarity, we're looking at the young man in the green shirt, is that correct?
Yes, we are, and his face is blacked out. I apologize. That's the focal point. Now, what you're viewing is the counselors really kind of pummeling this one child, and the other ones are sitting back because this is normal to them. This is what happens in these placements.
And Ms. Bradford-Gray, can you clarify again, are we looking at the same timeline, or is this a different day?
This is the same day, just in a different section of that facility. Thank you. I showed that not to spar up emotions, but in a way to do that. Because I think we talk about it, but we don't have a way to really see the type of trauma that is being instituted to our kids each time that we send them away to get rehabilitated. This did not rehabilitate that youth. In fact, it exacerbated his issues. And many of the youth around that have watched that and have felt like this is normal behavior and this is how they are supposed to be dealt with and handled. And we never want this. So when we're talking about looking at placements, we're not just talking about it from taking our kids away from their homes. We're talking about it from an area of respect and dignity that we should have for our kids, and an understanding that they are kids who are very impressionable and whose trauma exacerbates with some of these issues. So without being able to see this, we would have accepted the version that our kid was the one that took an aggressive posture. Our kid was the one that escalated the situation. Our kid was the one that needed to be arrested and placed in handcuffs and sent to court. And I'm glad that DHS helped us get that reversed. I would be remiss if I didn't say or talk about the fact that just yesterday I received a call from Carson Valley and the judge out there, who said that 10 of our youth that were placed in Carson Valley were now arrested for issues or challenges that were in that facility where people were acting rowdy and some were fighting. Our children, the Philadelphia kids, were actually arrested. So sometimes we're sending these kids to facilities because they have dependent needs and they're coming out with criminal convictions. And these are the things that we do not want. These are the things that the Defender Association works hard to avoid, but unfortunately, these are now in another county. I used to be the chief defender of Montgomery County, and I can tell you, Montgomery County does not send its kids to Carson Valley because there is an influx of Philadelphia kids there. So as a result, they don't want to mix them with Philadelphia kids. This is the perception of the children that we send there. There were town halls that were discussed in terms of there is going to be Philadelphia kids that infiltrated the schools, and we would have a zero tolerance for them. So people know that we are using these facilities outside of our county, and they are looking at our kids as if they are different, and they are actually overly policing them, overly critical of what they're going through, and in fact, exacerbating their trauma once again. So this is what I wanted to bring to the forefront of this hearing, and it's a real urgent need to rely less on these placements and build up community resources. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about a lot is race and who's in these facilities, who's in our system. And as you see, 73% of the children in our juvenile justice system are Black. That is glaring, and I think that's worthy to be said. As we're talking about race in our country and issues related to how we treat people of color, we know that their African American kids are coming into our system and they're only getting even more stereotyped by the fact that they are now a delinquent kid, or if they go to a dependent facility, they may come out a delinquent kid. 16% are Hispanic and 11% are white. So this is glaring when we're talking about our youth and their opportunities to prosper, and we're looking at the disparities and who is prospering and who is not. Some of the more recent studies that have come out in terms of looking at school discipline shows that young African American kids are disciplined at a rate of almost 8 times more than their white counterparts. I can tell you, as a person that has been privileged to send my children to private schools, I see the difference in the way that children are disciplined, and I see the difference between the way that children are even related or referred to the juvenile justice system. If I were a kid growing up in this day and age, I don't think I'd be able to become a lawyer based on some of the disciplinary practices that we have here and the labeling as a result of that. One of our areas of main concern for the Defender Association is to look at and understand the effects that placement have on our youth. You can turn. We want to understand what are the residential placements and what are they used for. And some of our, our judges make determinations to place our youth based on what we would call a referral process through a mental health psychiatric evaluation. And sometimes the psychiatric evaluation labels our kids differently than what we see in terms of their life experience. For instance, we have seen children that have been mirrored with abuse and trauma, but then would be labeled as oppositionally defiant disordered, as well as ADHD. These things set off the course for treatment. I recently raised with some of our treatment providers, why isn't there a PTSD diagnosis for our kids who have displayed or shown that they have been abused and neglected? And I was told a few different things, but right now we are starting to see that diagnosis creep up a little bit more, which can really start to help the funding resources for the therapeutic needs. The Defender Association also has partnered with the University of Pennsylvania so that we can start looking at these evaluations and making recommendations for community-based options. And so this is something that has been a really big game changer in the way we advocate for our children. Before, we hadn't had the wherewithal or experience to refute some of the evaluations or the diagnoses that have been given, but now we have what we call our own in-house experts that are allowing us to understand that based on the information that's in the report, a diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder is not warranted in this particular case. And we're able to bring that information to the courts as well as DHS, as well as community behavioral health, so we can have a different plan of treatment, one where the kid will actually get the rehabilitation that addresses their needs. Go forward. Another area of concern is the rise of young women in our juvenile justice system and the lack of resources that we have to deal with their issues. If you look at this map, these are the placements by gender across the states. And as you see, the square equals the placements that are strictly for women. There's only one in the state. And the circle are those that are strictly for males, and then the shaded in triangle are those that are that take both. We know George Junior Republic has not been taking admissions, so we're really down. And as a result, our young girls are forced to go outside of the state to other areas of the country to get rehabilitated. We have sent girls as far as New Mexico. And when we had a young girl that was in New Mexico, and she was really having a hard time adjusting, and she needed hospitalization, and so New Mexico took her to Las Vegas to be hospitalized. And these are the types of things that our kids are seeing all the time. We really need to focus on our girls and what we need to do even in our communities. For those that are not even in placement, but those are on probation, we don't have a lot of resources. I recently did have some interaction with Councilwoman Brown's office and through one of her aides, and we started to build a community resource of female mentors for some of these youth, the girls that are coming into our system. Our office screens them, comes up with a profile of what's driving the behaviors, and then matches them up with someone in the community through our Big Brother, Big Sister program. And it's been tremendous because some of these young ladies, they just need someone else to talk to. They need someone else to understand what's going on with them. And it's brought a lot of information and understanding about what we need to be doing for some of these girls. But we have a long way to go, and we need to develop those resources.
Chief Defender, if I could offer up one point of information. This portion of your testimony is very, very consistent with the testimony that was presented by our district attorney, underscoring the lack of programming for girls. We don't even have a sense of what's out there for girls. So my staff and I have already introduced a resolution calling for a hearing let's get a finger on the pulse of what exists, what's in the universe, and let that guide us on what we need to do more of. So your testimony only punctuates what he stated on the record as well.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Our lawyers and our social workers look in our community, and I will tell you the resources are very limited. So I appreciate the fact that you have your finger on that pulse. We really need more opportunities for girls to stay in their communities and get what they need. Go forward. Again, I talked about some of the assumptions of why kids are going into placement. 30% of the people or the children that the Defender Association represents go to placement for truancy purposes. And as we've heard time and time again, that they go to placement because they're not going to school, they're not doing well in school, and they go to these placements and they're really not getting the education that they need. We've been working with the coalition to build up this ability to understand what we need for educational purposes in some of these placements. And I think that the DHS and CBH, others have been on board, Dr. Haidt have been on board with exploring this. We just need to move like you said, the meetings into a plan of action as to how we're actually going to attack this. But it is something that Stoneleaf Foundation had done an extensive research on and really found that many of these placements were not meeting the educational needs of our kids. If you go there and you actually see the areas that's designated for learning, most of them are sitting by themselves to do packets, or some of them are looking on the computer without instruction, if you actually go and see it. And it's something that is an eye-opener, and I think that we're all willing to address that, and I hope to be a part of that movement coming soon. Other reasons why that we place kids are because of their mental health needs. But as we just learned through a hearing we had called Closer to Home, is that New York has stopped relying on placements to deal with mental health needs. They've been looking at resources within the community that help people navigate some of the culture of their own environment that exacerbates some of their mental health needs. And so that's what I'm hoping that we can move to, identifying those opportunities to say that while kids are in their own areas, there are triggers that they need to be able to deal with. And if we constantly send them away to deal with these in a setting that is not like their own environment, then when they come back, they're still not going to be able to cope with some of those pressures and those traumas that are triggers for their mental health needs. So with that, I will end my segment, and I think some of the possible solutions is to, of course, bring our youth that are in faraway residential placements back to Philadelphia. We have to build our understanding of our needs here. I think we're all in agreement that sending them away to far away is serving no purpose. And then we cannot understand what's going on in that culture and environment that may be different than Philadelphia. Two, they're being met with people who don't look like them, who don't understand some of their cultural environment and backgrounds. So these things are really not making for the best opportunities for rehabilitation. And we're going to be working collaboratively with stakeholders to assess these things. The compliance standards that we use, we need to look at culture and environment as well, and not to think that just some kind of check marks on a paper will do it, but also understanding what type of culture and environment should our kids be in, and working with these placements to understand diversity needs, diversity and inclusion needs. As you saw in that video, there were no diverse staff. None. And I know when I was a young practitioner and I went into these placements to see reviews, I often saw kids getting what they call disciplinary infractions for listening to rap music. These were things that would tack on months in their placement because they were listening to rap music when they were told they could not. You can't strip away someone's culture. You can only talk about them, about the healthiness of what they're listening to, but also kind of give some feedback and understanding of why this is a part of their culture. I myself do listen to rap music, and I don't feel like it's something that can be stripped away, but it's something that should be discussed in a healthy way. We can't say that people aren't who they are just because they come in our placements, but we can embrace the difference in diversity. And so I really do hope that we look at not just what's happening in placements, but the racial component as well, because it is a big deal.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ms. Bradford-Gray. Thank you. We're going to have testimony from our next two witnesses, and then we'll have a brief round of questions. And then, in the interest of time, and because we have our, a wonderful stenographer who actually does need a break, we're going to have to limit testimony to 4 minutes apiece. Is that okay? We have written testimony also for the audience members who are here. If you'd like to pick up any of the written testimony, including the testimony of the young people who spoke earlier, those are available on the desks over on this side. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my council colleague, Councilmember Quinones Sanchez, as well. So if the next witness can proceed, state your name and proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Gim. Thank you for this opportunity to address City Council and the committee regarding the impact of residential placement on the education of children and youth in foster care and the juvenile justice system. My name is Maura McInerney, and I'm the legal director at the Education Law Center, a statewide nonprofit legal organization dedicated to ensuring that all Pennsylvania's children have access to a quality public education. We represent the most educationally at-risk children, those living in poverty, children of color, English learners, children with disabilities, etc. Over our 45-year history, ELC has handled hundreds of individual and impact cases on behalf of children in foster care and the juvenile justice system. My testimony today stems from ELC's years of experience in addressing the educational needs of children and youth in residential placement. Our clients' stories are heartbreaking. We've been fortunate to intervene in many cases, but too often youth returning from and in placement find themselves far behind their peers. They give up and drop out of school. It's a loss that follows them for the rest of their lives. Children who are system involved are among the most educationally at risk of all student populations. They graduate at lower rates, score lower on standardized tests, have higher rates of special education eligibility, and are more likely to repeat a grade. In Philadelphia, half of youth in foster care and 65% of youth in the juvenile justice system do not graduate from high school. However, children and youth placed in residential placements are at even higher risk of school failure and are more likely to drop out. And the reasons for this are very clear. First, children in residential settings are required to change schools. They're often placed far away from their families and their communities, and this educational disruption undermines any academic progress. A student loses 4 to 6 months of educational progress with every school move. In contrast, you are 50% more likely to graduate if you stay in the same school. Children in residential care more often attend one or more different placements, and they don't have the option to remain in the same school. Second, children in institutional placements commonly attend on-ground schools rather than local public schools. On-ground schools are predominantly private academic schools. They exist largely in the shadows with little oversight of any local education agency or the state. Pursuant to state policy, these programs are subject to on-site monitoring only once every 6 years, only with regard to students with disabilities. They have wide discretion in educational programming. They're not required to follow the same rigorous or curriculum requirements or academic standards of public schools. So students attending on-ground schools are taught in multiple grade classrooms, sometimes with uncertified or improperly certified teachers, and they frequently receive below grade level coursework. 52% of child welfare providers report that the curriculum at on-ground school is far below grade level. It's often limited in instruction hours, relies heavily on worksheets, and fails to advance any basic skills. In some cases, students receive no education at all, or they spend their days completing worksheets, or they engage exclusively in credit recovery programs. They receive minimal or no live instruction. In addition, upon entering these schools, they're rarely evaluated. Moreover, the culture that exists in institutional placements undermines a child's ability to learn. How can a child learn if they are subject to fear, intimidation, restraints, physical and emotional abuse? Obviously, they're going to struggle in school. Many parents and education decision makers are never apprised of a child's legal right to attend a local public school, and in many cases, judges are placing students in on-ground schools specifically under a misguided attempt to solve a truancy problem. Instead, children with a history of absenteeism find themselves farther and farther behind than when they return to their neighborhood schools, and they're more likely to drop out. Third, students with disabilities are more likely to be placed in residential facilities, and these are particularly harming to these children. Cyber school does not differentiate instruction. They are in credit recovery programs or a one-size-fits-all program that will not work for them. The problems are myriad, from not obtaining a child's IEP to failing to do an appropriate and timely evaluation or progress monitoring, failure of school staff to differentiate instruction, failure to implement an IEP and providing no related services. Students with disabilities are denied a free, appropriate public education to which they are entitled, and they're never educated in the least restrictive environment with non-disabled peers. Finally, when youth return from residential placements, they find themselves, through no fault of their own, far below grade level, having few credits and having made little progress. Because private academic schools are not obligated to meet the same educational standards, the courses a youth takes will not align with the School District of Philadelphia to which they return. The courses they've had in residential schools may be electives, and they will not count toward graduation. A few on-ground schools do not even provide credit-bearing courses at all, guaranteeing that a student already behind academically will not be able to graduate with their peers. In our survey, 85% of youth and 50% of child welfare professionals reported difficulties transferring credits at all to public school. In addition, upon their return to the School District of Philadelphia, many of our clients experienced delays of days or weeks in being placed in an appropriate classroom or approved private school. In summary, we know that placing children and youth in institutional placements will harm them academically, emotionally, and sometimes even physically. Institutional placements are highly restrictive, they undermine academic progress, and they set our most vulnerable youth on a path to homelessness and unemployment. And all of this occurs with no oversight of children who are far away from families and communities. Our children must be safe, healthy, and receive all services to which they are legally entitled, including a quality education. We urge City Council to devote the resources that are necessary to end the segregation and isolation of our youth in institutional placements, and to build community-based, trauma-informed mental health and educational services in our city that will keep our children close to home with the educational opportunities and the stability that they desperately need and deserve to succeed in life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ms. Labella, if you could just state your name for the record.
Sure.
And again, we're trying to keep it to 4 minutes, and feel free to summarize your testimony.
Yes.
Thank
Will
you.
do. Thank you, Council Member Gim, Council Member Quiñones Sanchez, and committee members. My name is Gabe Labella, and I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights Pennsylvania. We are the independent, statewide, nonprofit corporation designated as the federally mandated protection and advocacy agency in Pennsylvania. DRP works to advance and protect the civil rights of adults and children with disabilities. Each year, hundreds of Philadelphia children with disabilities are removed from their communities and isolated from their families in distant institutional placements for long periods of time, with some even placed out of state, severing connections to family, to community, where the youth will return. I am here to ask that you proactively support efforts to bring our children home. When a child is adjudicated as dependent in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, through DHS, Office of Children, Youth, and Families, and the Child Welfare Program in each of the counties, is responsible for stability, permanency, and meeting the children's needs. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, nearly 1/3 of children coming into care have chronic medical conditions, and many more have mental and behavioral health needs. Many dependent children have post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health disabilities due to abuse they suffered in childhood. Others have existing or developing mental health conditions that are exacerbated by abuse, neglect, or the conditions of their lives in the dependency system. Still, others have physical or cognitive disabilities that their parents have found too overwhelming to deal with. For these children, the child welfare system, in conjunction with the medical assistance system, is responsible for providing trauma-informed mental health care and other community-based mental health and physical health services to preserve or reunify children and their families. When that is not possible, the child welfare system must provide appropriate homes, including therapeutic medical foster homes and residential treatment. Yet for hundreds of these children with disabilities, a safe home with a parental relationship and adequate health care is a distant dream. Due to an inadequate array of appropriate services and placements, children and youth are caught in a vicious cycle. Children are left in residential treatment facilities far beyond the point that such services are needed or beneficial, because there is nowhere else for them to go. The children who actually need time-limited RTF placements are then left in inpatient acute care units, detention centers, or are sent to facilities far away from their families and communities because the RTFs have no beds for them or do not want to serve their complicated needs. Here's a story about a young woman, Siobhan. 15 years old, from Philadelphia. She has bipolar disorder, PTSD, and ADHD, with a history of hospitalization for attempted suicide. Siobhan was sexually abused at the age of 5 and was adjudicated dependent in 2012 at the age of 10. In 2016, she was adjudicated delinquent on a simple assault charge and was placed at the Juvenile Justice Service Center in March 2017. At that time, a psychiatrist recommended that she be placed at an RTF and receive trauma therapy. She was needlessly locked in Juvenile Detention Center for 9 months, a place designed for youth to stay an average of 10 to 15 days. She was there while waiting for an appropriate placement and services. Eventually, Siobhan was sent to an RTF in Virginia because no one else will accept her in Pennsylvania. Similarly, children with mental health disabilities that result in acting out behavior are often ordered into punitive placements through the delinquency court. This is not because that is what is recommended by the experts, and not because it is what the judges deem appropriate, but because there are no other options available. Rather than getting the trauma-informed care that they need, they are re-traumatized, resulting in more acting out behavior, leading to even worse placements, such as adult prisons. Right now, DRP believes there are more, I can skip that, actually. We've had the data, and I'm almost done. DRP urges City Council to support a plan to obtain community resources that our children need to significantly reduce the population in residential placements and to reinvest funds in community-based trauma-informed services and programs. City Council must take an in-depth inventory of the needs of all Philadelphia children who are currently placed in institutional or residential settings. We ask that you call for a citywide task force of stakeholders to address this. Lastly, we ask that you require contracts with current providers be reassessed to ensure that all placements meet the health, safety, developmental, and educational needs of youth, and that oversight over all facilities be markedly improved. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Before we take a break, we have time for a few questions. Do you have any questions, Council Member? Okay. I just had like one or two really quickly. For Ms. Bradford Gray, first of all, thank you very much for sharing your powerful testimony. How do you usually find out if a child you represent is restrained or injured or has issues with placement?
Well, based on the proactiveness of our staff, Ms. Ellen Sapper sitting here had created, and went to the judge to get an order that whenever there are restraints, we receive notification and the video. So we often do get that information relatively soon. And so I'm really thankful to the work that she did with the courts to make that happen.
And, you know, many of the youth, as we heard earlier, are struggling or behind in school, you know, really need assistance in receiving their diplomas or GEDs while in placement. Do these placements help them meet their educational needs? Ms. McInerney, I think your testimony was pretty compelling around those concerns.
No, they do not. In fact, some of them are not equipped to assist the students in doing that, unfortunately. And the problem is that we're not paying any attention to the quality of the education when a child is placed there. The court should be considering it, GHS should be considering it. It has to be a factor when we decide whether or not to place a child in a particular facility. And it should be a part of the provider contracts as well to ensure that a child can receive and will receive a quality education.
May I also mention, though, that the mechanism that Pennsylvania uses to license educational facilities at RTFs and other institutions is the private academic school regulations, which were not designed for that or not appropriate for that, and that we really need to take a look at having regulations specifically addressing these type of placements.
And there has been a proposal to the private academic school board that we revise those regulations. We proposed it for publicly placed children to have academic standards that align with the district from which they come.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And for clarity, they school districts in the host counties in which the residential treatment facilities exist are prohibited from denying students placement solely based on their residential status. Is that correct?
That's correct. Pursuant to 24 PS 1306, a child has a legal entitlement to attend the local public school unless there is a court order that deprives the child of that right or an IEP team has made a different decision.
And do we have any analysis about what % of students actually get a chance to attend the host public school in that county?
Based on a survey that we did statewide through the Office of Children and Youth, as well as a survey that was done with the support of the Stone Lee Foundation, the majority of students are attending on-ground schools and are not attending the local public school. The percentage is currently unknown, but before it was around 80% that were attending the on-ground school.
Wow.
as
So only
opposed to the local.
20% were attending public schools in the host, roughly.
Right, but that also included congregate care settings. So those are children in group homes who would attend the local public school where there was no on-ground school.
Right. Okay, thank you. And my last question is, how are, we've been tracking especially some of our most vulnerable communities and youth populations, and in particular, how are our LGBTQ and gender nonconforming youth usually treated in systems and in placement?
Thank you for asking that question. That was actually something that we provided in our written testimony. There are not many facilities that can take information or support the needs of our LGBTQ population. And so that is one of the areas that we are really lacking in an understanding for their needs, for their specific rehabilitation treatments. I would say that there's almost, I don't know the percentage, but I can tell you that it is very abysmal if we start to look at those populations and are these residential treatments meeting their needs.
And the last question for Ms. McInerney, who's responsible for making sure that kids in on-ground schools are getting their educational needs met?
It is the responsibility of the Pennsylvania Department of Education, the private academic board that actually oversees and licenses those facilities. They rarely revoke one of those licenses because the standards are so lax and there's no requirement for inspection or under their licensing regs. However, we also need to look at the responsibility of the Department of DHS in terms of placing publicly placed children there, because we're certainly responsible for the welfare of those children. And this is one of the issues that must be taken into account in determining where a child is placed and what 3,800 licenses will be provided to these facilities. There's not enough coordination. We would ask that council actually urge the state bodies, both the PDE and DHS, to revise their licensing requirements to ensure that they're actually monitoring these placements, because they're certainly harming children every day.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
May I just also bring up a quick point of reference on the LGBTQ population. Some of the foster homes and group homes in Philadelphia are commonly rejecting these youth because of their status of LGBTQ, and often we are forced to send these youth who have misdemeanor cases, very minor offenses, to residential placements across the state. So I don't know what we need to do, but if we are contracting with group homes and foster homes locally, I think that we need to look at whether or not they are practicing discriminatory practices based on their identities and whether or not they are, violating any state law.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the last question I have would be for the commissioner. I know that Commissioner Figueroa, perhaps if you could come up and maybe answer the final question, which is, obviously Ms. Bradford Gray showed a very disturbing video. I know that myself and my colleagues, and I'm sure many people in the audience who saw it, were deeply troubled by it. Are we aware of whether we still contract with this agency and whether we're still sending students there, young people there?
So what was acknowledged in the testimony, it's a state-run facility. We have no contract. It's operated by the state. It's staffed by the state.
And so the young people who would go there how do our students get there? Through the court system?
They would get court ordered to, it's a higher level of security, and so the determination is not made by Philadelphia DHS, but that was not a contractor of ours.
Mm-hmm. So that they would not have been visited by DHS at all?
They would have been visited, and certainly this is a case that we were familiar with and worked closely with the defenders when we were made aware of the situation, yeah.
So you have visited this facility?
We have, so we're required to visit the children that we have. Probation does the case management work when it's a delinquent case. We don't have a case management responsibility. So unless it's a crossover, we don't have a safety obligation by law to visit that child.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your wonderful panel. We do have to take a break because our stenographer is fabulous and wonderful, and she needs a 10-minute break. So we're going to reconvene. We still have 2 more really great panels that are coming up with some really powerful testimony. So I hope folks can come back for the rest of that. Thank you. Yes, there'll be time at the end. Thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the next panel up to testify?
Representative Vanessa Lowry Brown, Key Tobar, and Terrell Carney.
First of all, thank you so much for your patience and presence today. We really appreciate you, and thank you for your patience in this time period. But this is such an important issue, and we wanted to give the young people, especially, the time that they needed to spend on this issue. So thank you. Representative Brown, welcome. Thanks for coming and visiting and spending time with us today here in City Council. It means a lot because this partnership is really important between our state, our city, and of course all of our agencies in the best interests of our young people. Thank you for being here.
Are we on? Okay. Well, you're welcome, and thank you so much, Madam Ginn. As Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown had said, we cannot operate in silos, and that's just not exclusive of our departments, but also as state government and city government working together. So thank you for those kind remarks. I just came down here today to listen and hear the testimony regarding our children and the placement. But after hearing, I decided that I would like to share some of my experiences of helping to advocate for the children of the 190th District in West and North Philadelphia. Several times in our district office on 52nd Street, we get calls from family members asking for assistance. And I'd just like to share some of the incidences that I've been actually an active advocate, not only a representative, but an advocate in helping to bring some resolution. One of the things that came to my attention was the issue of Wordsworth, which was actually located within my district. And when I found out that there were some grave things that were happening with the children, and particularly when we lost the life of, I believe his name was David Hess, and I found out also that some of the children, the girls, had been sexually violated by some of the staff members, and being an elected official to represent them in the state, my first instinct was, as a mother, was to protect those children and to make sure that those terrible things had been vindicated. And then I had to calm down and become a legislator, and I know as women you understand what I'm talking about, and then go into my official role. And what I did immediately was contact the Department of DHS here in the city, also Department of Health and Human Services in the state, to contact Wordsworth and talk to the executive director there. And what I found was that there were a lot of incidences where one was not talking to the other. And often here today, I've heard that from the city side saying that the state has responsibility, the state has responsibility, but then when I sit with the state says the city has all of the responsibility, and it goes back and forth. And I'm here to say that that has to stop. Because the only person who's suffering in the end is our children. And to have a child who is the responsibility of both city and state lose their life while their parents entrusted their children to us, or whether they were taken away from their families and given to us, we have to first of all acknowledge that. And to those children that are here that are not here, we have to say we're sorry. We have to atone for those losses and those grave mistakes. And we also have to say that we will accept responsibility and make sure that we can do whatever we can so that no other child can be hurt. So I just wanted to let you know that as a state lawmaker, I have a hard time when we sit here and you're asking these questions of accountability, and we hear the state, because you have almost 17 elected officials here for the state. That if these incidences are occurring and you see that there are things that need to be changed with state regulations, you could call us to a meeting at any time. All of us care about these children just as much as anyone else in this room. And we will definitely go to the governor's office, which I have done on several times. I have sat outside his door when I found out that Vision Quest and Wordsworth were having grave incidences occurring. I sat at his door and demanded his attention. And there is nothing that I wouldn't do to help with the city to advocate for them on the state level. So I just want to put that out there, that is something that can occur, can happen immediately. As of tomorrow, we can get together and we can find some type of resolution between the communication of the city and the state, and anything in the regulations that the state needs to do better, then let's start working towards that tomorrow. The other thing I'd like to say is that I was also involved with Vision Quest. When I found out that 5 boys had run away from Vision Quest, I immediately I did an editorial piece in the Inquirer, and I talked about what was occurring with our children in placement. And I said our children are titled armed and dangerous, and therefore a police officer can engage them in a very aggressive force once they are titled armed and dangerous. And I was very concerned about our children's welfare. And I put out there that if any parent wanted to surrender their child, to please contact me. I was contacted by 2 of those families, one of which we did meet with Attorney Michael Cord, and we also arranged for the police commissioner to meet us at the Philadelphia Tribune, and one of those children peacefully surrendered himself so that we could get that child some help. When we talked to that child told us of their experiences for why they ran away. And they ran away because they were being abused and they were being neglected. And one of the nurses who had formerly worked there came back after she had lost her employment there and helped those children to escape. So there was an adult who cared enough to help those children. We're not looking at the whole story. People are not telling you the whole story. So the children are getting labeled these problems, but we're not understanding why the children are acting out. And they're acting out because they are not being treated with respect and dignity. And that has to stop, Chairwoman. That has to stop. So I just wanted to also let you know exactly what it is that I do. So again, I'm State Representative Vanessa Lowry Brown. I am the ranking member on the Health Committee. I also sit on Children and Youth for the Harrisburg. I'm also on the National Council of State Legislators. I sit on the Health Committee there. In my travels across the nation and trying to find methods to heal our problems here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I sat in a conference with a Dr. Karen Burke, who travels the world and is renowned and known on dealing with adverse childhood trauma. And I say that to say that you have to bring the criminal aspect in with the health aspect. And what she is proposing and what so many other legislators are proposing is that childhood adverse trauma is a health condition. And until we declare that as a health condition, there's no way that we can properly address the needs of our children that are placed in criminal placement. The two must go hand in hand. Today, I would hope that the Commissioner of Health would have been here to hear some of these testimonies. I hope that moving forward that we can address it in a cohesive way where we're bringing health, the Criminal Justice Center, DHS, all of those parties together to help solve this problem. And Madam Chair, that's what I wanted to bring to this conversation. As I close, I'd just like to acknowledge some of our community advocates that I've been working with. Hassana Bennett is also, Mama Gail, and Orlando Acosta. I just want to thank them for their continuing effort to keep these issues ever prevalent in our community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. It is an important effort for us to work together, and as we try to work together on this task force or the broader coalition group, whatever that may be, we'll be making sure that you have a role to play around all of this, because I don't think we can get it done without a large group taking a look at what we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much for your patience, Key. And if you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. And as I said to other individuals, we're just going to keep everybody on a 4-minute testimony time. And of course, we have your formal testimony. If you feel like you can summarize, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
My name is Wakia Tobar, and I am a staff attorney in the Youth Justice Project at Community Legal Services. Thank you for the opportunity to offer remarks about the serious issues faced by LGBTQ youth and girls in institutional placements, and to also discuss the types of investments and resources needed to prevent unnecessary institutional placements with hopes that our youth can transition safely back into the community. For the entirety of my career, I have focused on solving issues system-involved youth face, with an emphasis on girls and LGBTQ youth. I started my career as an attorney and Zubrau Fellow at Juvenile Law Center, focusing on improving education for youth in institutional placements, eliminating solitary confinement, reducing unbearable costs and fees for juvenile justice-involved youth, and working on preventing youth homelessness in Philadelphia. Currently, as a staff attorney at Community Legal Services, the largest provider of free legal services in Philadelphia, my work includes providing holistic, youth-friendly civil legal advocacy to system-involved transition-age youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. In particular, I focus on reaching youth who are overrepresented and underserved in our systems, including LGBTQ youth, who represent over 40% of the youth homelessness population in Philadelphia, and girls experiencing homelessness, 34% of whom are pregnant or parenting. In addition to providing direct services, I also provide trainings for youth and youth-serving agencies and survey youth and service providers about the drivers of and solutions to youth homelessness in Philadelphia. I've been fortunate to gain access to learn and to serve this population through collaboration with many youth-serving agencies and shelters, including DHS, and specifically Tameen Farlow and David Bruce, who have been amazing partners in the effort to explore the needs of juvenile justice-involved LGBTQ youth and girls. In the span of 6 months, I have facilitated over 60 surveys, led workshops for over 100 youth and youth service providers, and interfaced with countless housing insecure youth who have been or are currently in shelter, juvenile justice placements, or in the child welfare system. What came out of those conversations was the hard truth that for many youth, their cyclical interactions with homelessness and system involvement first came as a direct result of the lack of alternative community-based housing and restorative programming for LGBTQ youth and girls in our community, and was a result of marginalization and lack of appropriate resources and gender-specific programming inside our institutions for girls and queer youth. For example, consider the case of S, who is a 22-year-old masculine-presenting young woman who identifies as lesbian and is currently homeless. S informed me that her interaction with the juvenile justice and homeless services system came as a result of the lack of adequate resources, organizations, and housing for youth with her identities. S began to run away as a preteen because of the tension and abuse she suffered at home because of her sexual identity and presentation. Luckily, S and her family were given DHS prevention services, but S's parents still rejected her identities and the family tension remained. After running away from home multiple times and missing a good portion of school, which led to truancy and loitering charges, S was placed in a secure residential placement in rural PA. In her rural PA placement, she faced further discrimination, targeting, and punishment from staff who lacked LGBTQ competence and whose personal bias continuously surfaced. This targeting led to not only a more restrictive confinement, but also to an extended confinement. Once finally released at nearly age 20, S came home to the same issues that drove her into placement. S's family still rejected her, although they were listed as her housing option in her reentry plan because she had no other housing option other than to remain in residential placement. Furthermore, S's confinement outside of her community caused her not to be aware of the limited resources that were available in her home community. As a non-parenting, gender-nonconforming lesbian, S did not feel comfortable or safe with the shelter options for girls and young women like her. This led S back to street homelessness. Too many youth share stories similar to S. That is why I'm eager through my project to continue partnering with DHS, shelter providers, and other youth providers in the community to ensure that girls and LGBTQ youth, in particular, receive appropriate and effective services. Services that include more community-based, safe housing options and programming for girls and LGBTQ youth, including queer parenting youth, more training for system-involved youth on available legal and social services organizations within their home community, and a continued investment in LGBTQ competence and gender stereotyping training, city and statewide for youth service providers. By focusing on building up community resources here in Philadelphia, we can continue to build on the progress that has already been made under the leadership of Commissioner Figueroa in reducing the use of congregate care for all youth and working to ensure that whenever safely possible, youth remain with their families and in their community. We can also ensure those who do end up in placement are able to connect early and effectively with the services and resources they need to successfully transition back home in a safe and affirming environment. I want to thank Councilwoman Gim and the Department of Human Services, fellow youth advocates, and the youth who shared their stories today, and I look forward to continued collaboration moving forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tobar. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Carney. If you could just say your name and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Terrell Carney, and I'm the supervisor of the education decision makers at the Court-Appointed Special Advocates. I've been in the child welfare system for approximately 9 to 10 years. And also, so CASA Philadelphia, the education decision makers are court-appointed to dependent and delinquent youth. For children in foster care, the role could be filled by a resource parent. For youth in congregate care, there is frequently a need for independent education decision maker. The service is critical because youth without a parent or guardian acting as their education decision maker has poor access to appropriate education supports in which they are entitled. At CASA, we serve about 100 youth at this time. We know the capacity is far beyond. Once a juvenile is placed in a residential setting, they typically attend an on-ground school facility. These on-ground schools, as we heard before in prior testimony, Councilwoman, they lack the potential need for educational success, and they also are placed outside of Philadelphia School District. Placement at an on-ground school is frequently made without assessment of the youth's educational needs, but is rather a result of their placement in a congregate care facility. The CASA EDM is appointed by the court to the youth who do not have a parent, a resource parent, a responsible adult acting as the parent for education decisions. Our EDM volunteers advocate that each youth is evaluated, assessed, and also to determine the type of placement that best meet their need. Youth in residential placements or other congregate care settings can attend the local public school within their district, as we heard prior. And also with advocacy and involved parent. And also the EDM can educate, make sure that the child is educated in a local public school setting with support and accommodations. And also to illustrate this, I want to bring up 2 cases. One is the case of Mia. Mia attended Central High School in Philadelphia, and due to an unfortunate series of events, Mia's mother had lost their home. Mia became truant and flunked out of Central. I'm sorry, let me just get, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Take your time, please.
It's very emotional. So Mia had flunked out of Central. She was adjudicated dependent and placed in a residential program with an on-ground school. The facility was located in the affluent area. When Mia got there, Mia was immediately placed at the on-ground school. She was given packets of work that did not meet her needs. The EDM, the school, and DHS had collaborated so the child could attend the local public school. Mia will be graduating this year. And also, we have another child by the name of Tyrone. He attended an on-ground school facility for 3 years. When the EDM got appointed, the 3rd year, the EDM asked to get his records and realized that the IEP said the same thing for the last 3 years. The EDM worked closely with the ELC, like to bring a lawsuit against that district. He is now placed in a foster home with a new IEP, as well as getting support services in his school setting. In my experience with youth who needs their needs met, I see that youth who often come back home to Philadelphia, they often drop out because of their on-ground school experience, and they do not have access to educational success. We stand beside our youth. We make sure that our youth go to the off-ground school facility. We make sure that they get appropriate educational evaluations and tools, as well as career exploration. These things do not happen at the on-ground school facility. The EDM volunteers walk directly with the youth to make sure that once they return here back to Philadelphia, that all records is coming back to the city, as well as that they're able to transition into a local high school. These youth that we talked about, they are the youth that will be contributing to our school-to-prison pipeline situation. And as we talked about it earlier, Councilwoman, these are our youth that if we do not get them back in a timely manner, if they languish for too long, once they come back to our big-name schools, our Bartram, our West Philly, they are the schools that cannot handle these young people. These are our young people that come back and really do not matriculate well because of this on-ground school experience. I thank you for being a proponent of CASA and the education decision makers as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Thank you both for your incredibly powerful advocacy. Just for a point of clarification for Mr. Carney, could you clarify whether foster parents can enforce the educational rights on a child's behalf?
And so a foster parent, they can enforce the rights of education. That I find as though that foster parents often aren't trained on the rights of kids and the needs that they have, and therefore, so we end up training them, but yes, foster parents can be trained.
And that's why we need that's why many of them need an EDM, is that correct?
Yes,
because it's a complicated system. They're there to support our young people, but EDMs are specifically trained in the educational rights of young people, especially around special education and disabilities.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for clarifying. And for Wakita Tobar, could you talk a little bit about what you recommend are some resources that are needed to reduce those kinds of institutional interactions for our LGBTQ and homeless youth?
Sure, thank you for that. What I find is that we need more emergency shelter. I am excited about the resources that were recently put in place, but we definitely need more emergency shelter for queer parenting youth. Our youth are very intersectional. They're youth who are also have disabilities, so we need more emergency shelter. We need more LGBT affirming counseling and prevention services for LGBTQ youth. As I stated in my story, DHS had connected with that family. We need to make sure that the staff are being LGBTQ trained and competent so that we can have more prevention, use that more fully. We need more legal services and social services organization education for system-involved youth. It's vital to their reentry. So while they are in placement, they need to be trained on the resources that are available in their community.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories of hope and struggle as well, and thanks for being such great advocates. Will the clerk please call the final panel?
Shayna Fizell, Randall Sims, and Kate Burdick.
Hi, thank you so much for your patience. Welcome. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your being patient through this hearing. If you could, Ms. Burdick, if you want to start and start by stating your name for the record, and then you may proceed with your testimony. As we say with everybody else, we're keeping folks to 4 minutes apiece, and if you feel like you can summarize, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Certainly. I think actually, if it's all right with the committee, Ms. Fazell is going to begin.
Okay, yes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Shayna Fazell. I'm the National Policy Director at Youth Advocate Programs. I'm here today with my colleague Randall Sims, who's the Regional Director for Philadelphia Youth Advocate Programs, or PIAP. Our mission as an agency is to deinstitutionalize young people through intensive in-home supports for them and their families. We were established as an organization more than 40 years ago right here in Pennsylvania. Our first mission was in Harrisburg to get young people out of Camp Hill Prison and away from adult prisoners, and all of our work that follows is based on a simple premise. that families and communities, when properly resourced and supported, are the best places for kids in need. We partner with government, like here with DHS, to provide families with the support they need to keep their kids safely home. We do this by intentionally recruiting advocates from the same neighborhoods as our kids and families to maximize engagement, credibility, and connection. Our model builds on youth and family strengths as a means to address challenges, build competency and confidence, and achieve stability. We rely on several principles to guide our work, including cultural and linguistic competency in the people that work with our young people, 24/7 availability and individualized services, partnering with government agencies for our shared missions, maintaining an inclusive intake policy and unconditional caring. This means we don't turn away any young person and we don't kick any kids out of our program. Respect for our families as equal partners who have voice, choice, and ownership over what happens to them, and relentless advocacy. These principles and our strong partnerships with government agencies like DHS, our families, young people, and community members are what have led to our success here at Philadelphia Youth Advocate Programs. Ultimately, working in partnership in this way helps keep communities safe, saves dollars, and gives our young people the opportunity to become contributors to their communities and not just recipients of services. And now I'll turn it over to Randall to talk a little bit more about our program here.
Thank you. Councilwoman, in the interest of time, I can summarize my testimony. Youth Advocate Program has been in Philadelphia for 41 years.
If you could just state your name for the record first. Thank you.
My name is Randall Sims, and I'm the Regional Director of the Philadelphia Youth Advocate Program,
Thank you.
commonly known as PIAP. We have been in Philadelphia for 41 years. We have been funded all that time by the Department of Human Services, and we run 2 programs which are designed to offer post and pre-adjudicatory services to young people. In the past 9 months, we've served over 300 young people and their families. In 3 of our programs, we've achieved some results, some data which we think are very noteworthy and support the efforts of this committee today to prove that providing services to young people, intensive support to young people in their homes and in their communities provides remarkable results. In our ERC program, 93% of the young people who we served remained arrest-free for the time they were in our program. 82% of them were not adjudicated for any new offenses. And of the ones who were, only 2% were adjudicated for felonious offenses. We helped increase the rate of kids remaining in their homes from 80% to 93% while they were servicing them. In our day treatment program, which is our community-based program, 93% of the young people in our program remained arrest-free while we served them. 84% were not adjudicated for any new offenses. And in our gender-specific program, a program we run specifically for girls, 90% were not arrested and 93% were not adjudicated. We feel these numbers present strong evidence that keeping kids safely home with intensive support works. I have stories of 2 young people, we have more than 2, but 2 young people who have really shown remarkable success and turnaround by being involved in our program. We've changed their names just for privacy's sake. Verdine, a young woman who was sent to us through the family courts. All of our referrals come through family court, so that means she was arrested for fighting in school. She came to our program. We assigned her an advocate. We helped her with some anger management classes. We helped her understand what triggered her feelings of anger. We helped her build a support system, a team of people she could go to when she needed support, guidance, or direction. We got her engaged in activities that appealed to her interests, like education and sports. She wanted to be a teacher, and she wanted to give back. And we helped her improve her socialization skills. We helped her get summer employment and later hired her as a part-time receptionist in our offices. We raised funds through contributions from staff and caring adults in her community that enabled her to participate in the International Street Soccer event, an international event in Brazil, which she had participated. She completed her high school and is currently engaged in post-secondary training at community college and works part-time. She also still interns occasionally at YAP. Rick was assigned to us because he was arrested for theft in the workplace. placed on probation. His probation required him to do community service, have a curfew, and be restricted to places where he could go and to people with whom he could associate. He was assigned community service at a homeless shelter. Rick revealed to his advocate that he had fun helping people, and he realized he meant something to others. He developed a respect for the value of life and wanted to continue giving back to the community. He volunteered more than 30 hours at the Chosen 300 mission. Rick worked hard to improve his grades by getting involved in a number of extracurricular activities. He demonstrated a sense of discipline and commitment by participating in various after-school activities and completing his program plan with YAP. He was admitted to Drexel University. Both of these young people received $1,000 scholarship support from YAP's endowment fund to help them with their educational goals. These scholarships are renewable yearly as long as the students stay in good standing. This approach works. We need more of it in Philadelphia. We need more resources, more investments in communities and families, and the supports they need. We thank DHS for being such a strong partner with us to help us bring and keep so many young people safely home over so many years.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Councilmember Gim and the committee for calling today's hearing. My name is Kate Burdick, and I'm a staff attorney at Juvenile Law Center. At the beginning of today's hearing, you heard from Quilla, Hod, and Lily, young people from Philadelphia and youth advocates with Juveniles for Justice, who described the horrific experiences they endured while in juvenile justice and child welfare institutional placements throughout the Commonwealth. Solitary confinement, abuse from guards, strip searches, poor quality education, and separation from their families. They spoke at today's hearing on behalf of the more than 1,300 Philadelphia youth placed in institutions and group homes through our juvenile justice or child welfare systems. Quilla, Hod, and Lily have shown tremendous courage in sharing their stories they and other young people so often keep quiet out of fear of retaliation or the pain of reliving these traumatic memories. Quilla, Hod, and Lily have bravely stepped up on behalf of other youth today, and now we, as a community, must all step up. For over a year, Juvenile Law Center has been working with a cross-section of advocates to consider strategies to tackle the persistent problem of youth institutional placements. We know placements are dangerous, ineffective, overused, and expensive. We know they're creating a host of problems for youth when they re-enter the community. We know placements especially hurt youth of color, youth with disabilities, LGBTQ youth, girls, and youth with multiple marginalized identities. Today, we call on council to take notice of this terrible problem that has too long escaped public attention and outrage. But also today, we are tremendously hopeful. We and the agency leaders you heard from earlier share a vision of replacing these harmful youth institutional placements with family and community-based services right here in Philadelphia. DHS and others are already working on this problem. DHS has shown real success at reducing the number of youth in child welfare facilities. And we have a district attorney's office that recognizes that locking up kids and throwing away the key helps no one. Other jurisdictions are forging this path and are willing to share their lessons with us. We have reached the tipping point on this issue. All the work DHS, advocates, youth and families, and others have already set in motion on this issue has prepared us to make a joint commitment today. A commitment to a campaign where all youth are provided the services they need in their homes, in communities, and in Philadelphia. We are especially excited to announce that we've begun working with DHS, advocates, and other agencies to launch a citywide task force to address this issue. And we're calling on City Council to support the new task force and assist our city agencies in an effort we are calling Safely Home Philly. Specifically, we propose these action steps. First, we ask City Council to support the task force in 3 ways. Council should ensure relevant stakeholders, including family court judges, are included and actively engaged in the process. It is also essential that the task force foreground the voices of youth and families in all aspects of the reform. Second, the task force will identify the services in progress that can best serve our youth's needs. We ask Council to support that effort by committing the resources to support the task force's recommendations. We are specifically calling on Council to approve city agencies' future budget requests that reinvest the funds currently spent on institutional placements into community-based, trauma-informed services and programs. Almost any service offered in an institution can be offered more cheaply in the community. Let's reinvest in our communities, using taxpayer dollars to build up the programs and resources that can meet our youth's needs right here, rather than using them to send youth across the state. Third, City Council should also provide the oversight and accountability necessary to keep the initiative on track. Within 1 year, the task force must develop a comprehensive plan to reduce reliance on residential placements and bring our youth safely home. The task force must brief City Council on that plan and subsequent progress. In addition, we ask Council to provide city agencies with the support they need to reassess contracts with current providers to ensure that any remaining placements meet the health, safety, developmental, and educational needs of youth. As long as any children remain in institutional placements, we need mechanisms to ensure that they are safe and that their needs are being met. City Council should also be a voice for Philadelphia youth at the state level and advocate for necessary changes in state licensing, oversight, and regulation of facilities. In conclusion, we know that institutional placements can cause long-lasting harm to youth. We also know that there are alternatives that work better and are more cost-effective. Our youth have taught us how urgent and devastating this problem is, and our leaders have come here today openly committed to reform. Dramatic, lasting change is absolutely within our grasp. Let's commit today to supporting our youth, families, and community by investing in trauma-informed, community-based services and programs so we can bring our Philadelphia youth safely home. Thank you.
Thank you very much to this panel. Thank you for your tremendous advocacy, and especially to Mr. Sims and Ms. Fazal for your ability to show us that things working locally and small and in a very personal way can make such a difference in young people's lives. It was very encouraging to hear that, and many of us who work with our young people know the possibilities of their resilience and their ability to, overcome tremendous difficulties can happen, but we need to put those efforts, those concentrated supports there. And thank you very much, Ms. Burdick, for your tremendous effort to move forward on the Safely Home Philly initiative. We're looking forward to being partners with you on that. Thank you very much. I believe we have a few additional individuals who would like to testify. We are going to keep testimony to 3 minutes. And if the clerk could please call the first, the next witnesses forward.
Jamie Fader, Mildred Kress, Kimberly Tazioli, Ms. Sandra Bennett, Mr. Orlando Acosta.
And before proceeding further, I'd like to just acknowledge the presence of our wonderful council colleague, Councilwoman Janie Blackwell. Thank you so much for the tremendous work you've done on this effort for young people. Thank you. Could the clerk please clarify again who the witnesses are? Excuse me, ma'am, we're just checking. So if the clerk could please clarify who the next speakers are.
Jamie Fader, Mildred Kress, Kimberly Tazioli, Ms. Sandra Bennett, and Orlando Acosta.
Welcome. Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes, and we will please identify your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Thank you so much for your patience.
Sure. Councilwoman Gunn, I thank you for calling a public hearing on the institutional youth placements. This is an important issue that's being addressed in numerous jurisdictions around the U.S., and I've been worried for a while that Philadelphia and Pennsylvania are falling behind. My name is Jamie Fader, and I'm an associate professor of criminal justice at Temple University. I've conducted over 20 years of research on Philadelphia's system-involved youth, including an award-winning book called Falling Back: Incarceration and Transitions to Adulthood Among Urban Youth. My research has found that even the most therapeutic of youth placements are punitive in nature. Therapeutic messages received inside these institutions are often stigmatic, telling youth they are to blame for their own bad decisions, and that even with treatment, change is unlikely. And I'm just going to read a passage, a really short passage from my book. The particular facility that I studied does an intake process where they read through kind of a treatment manual, and they read a series of statements to each incoming youth. The last statement is this: "We are aware that you may go through a period of monasticism where you will try to avoid all criminal thinking and actions. You will eventually grow tired of this and start looking for excitement again. Violation equals excitement. You will seek it out because that is the way you are." And the young men that I spoke with in my book talked with me about their counselors repeatedly predicting their failure after the program, saying that they were going to end up in the adult system or even dead. Also, my book documents how removing youth from their communities does not prepare them to meet the structural challenges that they face upon return, including the employment issue that we talked about earlier in this hearing, and don't help them become productive adults. These youth have high rates of failure as measured by new arrests and continued involvement in crime, and as we've talked today at length with getting back into school. Other facts about youth incarceration, now I'm going to kind of move to research done in other settings. The Census of Juveniles in Residential Placement, their most recent data is from 2015, and that has Pennsylvania at over 2,400 court-committed youth in residential placement, making it the third-ranked state in sheer numbers after California, which has almost 4,000. 3,900, and just below Texas, also at 2,400. And as a reference, New York State, which has engaged in reform to move youth out of facilities, was only in 2015 at just over 1,000. The use of youth confinement has declined dramatically nationwide, as research has noted its expense and its collateral consequences.
Your testimony.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention reports that the conditions of confinement for youth facilities are cause for concern. 39% of youth in residential treatment facilities report being afraid of being attacked by staff or other residents. Residential facilities are disruptive to school attendance, and most Philadelphia youth who come home from placement ultimately drop out of school. Jurisdictions that have embraced smaller cottage-like placements close to home, like Missouri and New York, have demonstrated that it's possible to keep kids in their own communities without compromising public safety. And finally, incarceration is a costly alternative to addressing youth's needs in their own communities. Leading Gladys Carry-On, Director of New York State's Office.
If you could please wrap up.
This is my last couple words, I promise.
Yeah.
She says that we could spend system-involved youth to Harvard for the cost of out-of-home placements. The U.S. spends between $8 and $21 billion to incarcerate youth, including the cost of future recidivism, lost wages, Medicare, Medicaid spending, and cost of sexual abuse. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Bennett?
Hi, I'm so glad to be able to tell my story one more time. Here's what happened. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ms. Bennett, and I'm here to speak for my daughter and other children who belong from the system. She's considered missing. I have called many times to DHS to try to regain my daughter back. And me and another lady by the name of Mary Lou, y'all don't know her, she wrongfully lost her daughter. And they wrongfully stolen children up in foster care needlessly, even from the hospital. They took my daughter right out the hospital. I'm trying to get anybody to support me, to support finding my daughter back and being a voice for all the children wrongfully lost through DHS, slipping through the system. Needlessly placed in foster care. And my daughter's caregiver was found on a criminal website. I'm just asking anybody, could they support me with getting her back and being an advocate and being a voice for all the children wrongfully taken from their children. And they should, law enforcement, they should get law enforcement legislation in Harrisburg and all around this country to get law enforcement to investigate them foster homes. And my daughter's caregiver was found on a criminal website. I don't know what the children, I've called many times year after year to get my daughter back. And this happened to hundreds of poor children all around the city of Philadelphia. Their daughters are needlessly going to DHS. And the judge stopped my parental rights needlessly when she was never abused, and I had 4 parent declared certificates, and also had my humanitarian certificate and all that. And I do have a house for her to come to. Unless anybody in here in City Hall can help get there, just to open up the case immediately as soon as possible to get my daughter back with me. I have resources to put her in college and raise her a better life. And she was never abused and nothing. I had kept all my WIC appointments when I was carrying her, when I was expecting her. Now she's lost in the system. At the age of 22, she's still lost and missing the system. I think she got pregnant behind my back. And I want to let y'all know that some of the young girls getting pregnant up in DHS. They need to call law enforcement and investigate every foster home around the city in Philadelphia and everywhere else. I want to start something like a pound me movement for all the children lost in DHS and families that are needlessly separated for no reason. And I heard the judges get paid, the DHS workers get paid, and the foster parents get paid to keep the kids in the system. That's what they're in there needlessly. People keep saying, what's she in there for? I said, I'm a good mother. What's she doing in there? I took care of more than 15 children in a certain neighborhood. I'm a good mother. I'm a people person. I'm also a humanitarian. I like to be nice to children. I'm really nice to children. I deserve to have my child back with me. That's all I got to say. My daughter's been considered missing now, and I've called everywhere possible. Nobody helped me get her back yet. I'm asking y'all to help me and pass legislation for DHS to stop taking children, the family court judges to stop them, the parental rights needlessly for keeping the children in foster care for profit. Here's a number to our agency called Mother Warriors. The number is 215-848-1120. They expose what DHS is doing and also the family judges. When I have called community legal services and all these free legal services, they turn me down year 3 in the news when they take my story. I had called every news station to take my story, and my story is going to help many other children to be united. I'm speaking of my daughter, Latasha, and all the other children wrongfully lost in the system needlessly. When she was never abused, she was never sick or nothing. When I was carrying her, when I did have her in the hospital, they came into the hospital, and I went to the place for placement. They put up for adoption without my permission.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bennett, and we will definitely have somebody circle back to you about your case.
We need a pro bono lawyer and get somebody to help open my case and for all the other children lost in the system.
Thank you very much
everywhere.
for testifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Acosta, thank you so much for your patience.
Can you help us get a lawyer? I'm going to stay here to the very end. Can you help us get a lawyer to reunite my daughter? That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much for testifying. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta.
Okay, I'm leaving now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gim, and I want to commend you on all the work that you do and everything like that. I'm here because my family was in the system for about 3 years. They had a case open. The first 2 years they had it open, nothing was found. This was based on just truancy alone. And it all started from when I would testify at the SRC meetings about different things that was going on in my son's school, different schools around, and different things of that sort. So, and how I know that is because one day when I testified that one of the DHS workers showed up around 8, 9 o'clock at night and said that we had a report. And then when the woman realized who I was, she said, you do testify at the SRC meeting. So then all that started from that point. So the point of it is that we really have to look at things in a way where a lot of these cases that they have in DHS has to be really evaluated in terms of systemically being valid cases that's being opened. Because a lot of cases that I'm coming across and people I'm advocating for and things that I'm finding out, that a lot of these cases don't have a lot of valid credibility behind it. So that's the key thing. And also you have to look at it from the standpoint of the workers that go out, because a lot of the workers that go out to evaluate the homes don't even have familiarity with the cases. They don't keep abreast with each other. They don't provide transportation aspect, because a lot of times when they would come out to our house when they did have a case open on us, they asked us, well, what did you need? We would tell them, well, the barrier that we had was transportation. They didn't even provide any transportation, any aspect of resources for transportation in terms of that. So these are the things that need to be looked at when you look at different perspectives of cases that are open on top of it. You know, and I know you will look at that in terms of that, because I know that's what you've been doing it for many years, and I do appreciate that, you know, and you know, and I commend you on the hearings, because I mean, you do pull things up from the community standpoint. And we have to have community at the table of any policies that get implemented, because without community being at the table, the framework of what the policy will look like. Sure, you can have all the organizations you want at the table, but if there's no aspect of community at the table in framing work, you know, in framing this work, then that part of it's going to be lost, because a lot of organizations are not coming into the most poorest communities.
Thank you. Thank you. And we share that mission. Thank you so much, Mr. Acosta. I appreciate it. Thank you to thank you to all of you for testifying and for staying here today. You know, today is not the end. I think that there were an incredible amount of things that were raised today that we can pursue. I'm specifically interested in conversations with our state partners on reforms that specifically strengthen the educational component of our education programs at the residential treatment facilities. I think it was a great partnership with State Representative Lowry Brown, who was here earlier, to talk about how to move that forward. We're going to continue talking to our partners at DHS, the school district, at CBH and DBH, actually, who have been great partners, about truancy issues, so we can ensure that we keep our kids out of the system. And I also want to have a larger conversation about contracts to see what kinds of safeguards we can put in place to ensure that we aren't going to pay for solitary confinement, for physical restraints, and for subpar education. And finally, we look forward to a conversation with our district attorney and his efforts to reduce the number of kids who actually make it into the system. And of course, a resounding yes to that task force, to a coalition-led, partner-built approach to a very, very difficult and complicated issue, but one in which I think today we made great strides forward. I really want to thank Commissioner Figueroa. I want to thank Karen Lynch from the School District of Philadelphia for staying through the entirety of this testimony, some of which was very difficult to hear. Again, thank you so much to our incredible partners on this, the Defenders Association, the Juvenile Law Center, Education Law Center, Community Legal Services, to our partners at Disability Rights PA, at CASA, and so many others. And of course, this hearing happened first and foremost because of our young people, because of Jihad and Quilla and Lily, who spoke their truths, who spoke to their pain and called upon us to do so much better than we thought possible, and demand us to meet their needs. And that is the most important and highest calling that we can have as officials who are put in a position to do that. So I want to thank them. I want to thank their advocates and supporters. I know they wouldn't be here without so many of the adults who believed them first and foremost. So is there anybody else who would like to testify to this resolution? Okay. All right, if you'd like to come forward.
I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. If you could just say your name into the record and proceed with your testimony, and we're keeping it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Vanessa.
You can have a seat, please.
No, I'm okay. My name is Vanessa Leary, and my daughter is in placement for, thank you. While she was in Mayfair School, she was attacked the first 3 days there, 8 times in 1 year. I kept reporting it, asking for help, for services, for something. They said my daughter is too sensitive. So I was okay. I asked DHS and everybody else for services. Nothing was done. They said they'll look into it. My daughter got to the point where she started cutting herself. I had her put in the hospital. She only had 3 cuts on her due to stress. DHS got involved. Finally, I asked them for therapeutic services, behavior services, something to help her for prevention of cutting herself, something for bullying, something. I got, okay, we'll handle it. While my daughter was in a mental health facility, they decided to block me for 43 days. And this is DHS. I'm asking to speak to my daughter, make sure she's okay, making sure she's getting the adequate therapy that she needed, trying to talk to the therapist, but I couldn't because apparently I was blocked by DHS, a worker from DHS. So while she was there, she came forward. I finally got a call from a nurse saying while she was there, she was attacked 8 separate times. One of those times was by a staff member because she was showing signs of stress and anger. So I said, okay. I told her, let me talk to my daughter. My daughter said, Mom, I reported that I was raped. And they told me that I have to wait to make sure it gets processed properly. I said, okay. I said, I was always taught that DHS and children and youth will always help you when you ask for it. We've only lived in the city for 2 years, and DHS and Children Advocate has completely blindsided me with whatever they call help. While my daughter reported it twice to the Child Advocate and to DHS. The children called me, not the children, the police department called me, asked me if I knew the person, and they gave me a name. I said yes, and I told them where to locate the person. It's funny, nothing was done for 4 months. I went to the police station and found out that there was no call, no electronic inquiry, nothing on that person, nothing at all. So I took my daughter's diaries from while she was in the facility and handed it over to the police to have them properly investigated. So they would be getting information from Children and Youth from Bucks County, Child Advocate from Bucks County, from all the services from Bucks County. And I want to make sure that somebody is held accountable from Child Advocate and DHS for my child's safety, because she was put through a very intimate exam, and nobody was there to comfort her. Nobody was there. They wouldn't allow me to talk to her, to let her know what she's going to be experiencing. That is not right for no 12-year-old to go through. And while she was there, it's a nice job that they did. While I was blacked out, my daughter started cutting herself while they were doing their so-called interrogation. That's what my daughter put it as. She said it wasn't questioning, it was interrogation. They kept telling her, if this person didn't do it, you can't see your family for the rest of the time you're here. And my daughter was in fear because of this. So when she was going through this, the number she has when she went in was only 3 cuts. The time when they finally lifted it, DHS finally lifted that blackout for me to see her, was 27 cuts up her arm. Somebody has to be held accountable for this.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm sure that this is a very serious situation, and we're happy to follow up with you. And I know that there are other agencies that are here that we can talk with you through that. I'm sorry for your pain.
No problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone else here who would like to testify to this resolution? Seeing no one else here to testify on the resolution, this concludes the business of the Committee on Children and Youth and Education for today. The public hearing on Resolution 171142 is recessed to the call of the chair. And thank you all very much for your time, patience, and attendance. Thank you.